This a little different.
Yeah, yeah. You have to reconfigure your whole system if you want to fix this.
No, we specialize in the live stream. We ain't trying to do no production.
No, this is live.
I know. I said we specialize in live. Not so much the production and the editing.
No. You see this?
I got you. I saw you. I see what you do, but I'm just saying when we stress on it, we don't because we got enough to do with the board and all that. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I got you.
I'll give you maybe this see that right there? That's right here. I don't know which camera this is. Nah. Better enough? Oh, you want the mouse in front?
No, I'm just gonna see if I can do it this way.
Like standing there?
Yeah.
You want to sit chair or?
Yeah.
Or you want to sit right here? I mean, I can move
How
this
does this
table.
work for what you're doing, what you guys are both doing? If I
Brand.
Cool, I just don't know.
Oh, where do you want to sit?
think I'd sit somewhere close to the screen so that you guys can see the screen can be seen.
I thought you was gonna be sitting in front of the
I
computer.
can do that too, sure.
Oh.
What do you think? Tell me.
Because then you can see the
Yeah, but I can see it when it's up here. See, it's up there, like on the screen up there. So.
I thought you were gonna sit.
Y'all go ahead, man. Let me do it.
I'd probably rather either sit here facing out or
What do you want me to
or
face
there.
this?
No, I don't need that. Because I can see it up here. See,
Alright, cool.
so I'm okay.
I just want to make sure everybody don't.
Yeah. Now, when you film, where would you be filming?
I'm gonna be right there.
And your film projector is.
My cameras are right there.
Oh, good. Okay.
So if anything, I might adjust the camera here because I got.
Sounds good.
I'll be switching on back and forth.
Sounds good.
Alright. So now I'm like, where's the table? Are they gonna put the table up? Did they put
No, but you know, I was If you get over this side, there's a few people already here, but we get, but there's the plug down there. Okay. Or that might be too much. But where's the one you said what? It's right there, up against that wall. You got all the secrets. Yeah. That's too far. Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Too many people, well, so many people involved with getting word out. Tupac died.
That's worldwide. That one is Larry Weathers with Ricky Ross. So people want to expose the CIA. They made it look like a suicide.
So, guys, died, right?
You got a good memory, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, bro. You're welcome.
So tell me. Yeah, so
But I'm sure right now, you already had that.
Yeah.
You actually in not too many people with that kind of courage. Yeah. Like last spring. Well, actually last spring. Well, I'll let it know that we looked up. I will.
Square. How long you been doing this? Well, I came out with the Tupac book in 2007, and the Drugs as Weapons book in 2015. And so, yeah, we've been getting this information out there from the fall of 2007. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think my wife thinks that didn't follow my script for the Mohawk
Really?
Speed film.
Oh,
But that's fine. I'm flattered they did follow my timeline. They did a pretty good job overall. I thought it was a good movie. Yeah, for a major motion picture, they got a lot out there.
Yeah, I'm like, I would love to get to an interview. Yeah. Are you Philly based or?
Yeah. Yeah, Baltimore's, I live in 45 minutes. Yeah.
We have we're trying to have the East Coast covered. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think it's fine. Somebody got it. Oh, I ain't go.
That'd be nice to have connections. Testing, 1, 2. Testing.
Yeah, turn it on. Is everyone?
Yeah, it's working.
Good.
I'm just making sure things are working.
Okay.
And I turned it away. It was working. Yeah, it's working fine. I'll just keep it low.
Ready to get started?
Sure. Whatever you like. Hey,
Good. We're gonna test the tables up first. Take a look, okay?
We'll just let you know find out first, and we'll take a discussion.
Great. So I'm sitting back.
You ready? You good?
yeah.
Taking a little break. Like,
It's okay. No problem. Sure.
All right. Good afternoon. You're going to enjoy much of the knowledge. So we have a powerful panel, but we're going to open it up with John Potash, who actually wrote the book, FBI War on Tupac. So I hope you all enjoy it. Appreciate you all for coming out. So I just want to say thank you. And we have Sister Ari going to be in the panel. She's here as well. I'll introduce her. Ari Squires, I say, film producer, as well as Brother Haki from Black and Nobel up in Philadelphia. So, and this is John Potash. So let's give him a welcome.
Thanks a lot, Brother Haki, and thanks everyone else for coming down here, particularly my Philly friends Hakeem from the Black and Nobel Books, who very nicely hosted a number of my presentations up in Philadelphia. I'm going to move over a little bit so that people can see me a little better. Okay. You can place that where. So guys, I've got a bunch of images I want to show you based on my research, and I started researching this topic, the FBI war on Tupac Shakur and black leaders, in at the end of December of 1994, and I've been working on first the book Drugs as Weapons Against Us, starting in 1991, researching that, and the subtitle of the second book, which I'll show up here in a moment. Let me just fast forward to this. Now this is the second book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. And I started in 1991 researching this, and as you can see, the subtitle is The CIA's Murderous Targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lennon, Cobain, Tupac, and Other Activists. And so as I was researching the Black Panthers in December of 1994, I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. I'd started researching in Baltimore, moved down to Washington, D.C., and the Washington Post said, another strange twist, the same police officers that came to Tupac Shakur's New York sexual abuse incident, where they charged him with sexual abuse, were the first to arrive when he was shot in this New York recording studio lobby. And so they said that's just one of the many strange twists in his trial and police foul play situations in his trial. Now, they didn't list those different aspects of police foul play. But so I started, so as I was researching the Black Panthers and read about the counterintelligence program, particularly against Tupac's parents, who were, his mother was a one-time leader of the Harlem Black Panthers, I thought, are they targeting Tupac like they targeted his Black Panther family? And so I called his New York trial lawyer, Michael Warren, and he said, yes, they are. I believe that they're targeting him, with the new counterintelligence program, and nobody's writing about it. So we shared some of the same magazines that we both read, national progressive activist magazines. We talked about them and how I was going to try to put in this interview with him and in an article in one of those magazines. Sadly enough, most of those magazines were, had white publishers who weren't ready to believe that Tupac Shakur was a serious activist. So I could only publish that article in a local magazine in Washington, local activist zine. And so it took me another 2 years before Covert Action Quarterly said they consider an article. I started publishing in Z Magazine, some other national activist magazines, and a Washington, New York-based magazine called Covert Action Quarterly had been started by some CIA whistleblower named Phil Agee. And so finally in 1998, they published this extensive article on the FBI war on Tupac Shakur and black leaders. And but of course Tupac was killed, and I argue assassinated, in 1996. Now, I'm going to go back to that original picture. I'm going to go forward a little bit, actually. Good. So, I don't know. Let me see this. Okay, there we go. So, guys, now, if you did most of the people in here, did most of you guys see the movie All Eyes on Me on Tupac? Okay, good. So, in that movie, I thought that movie did a good job of presenting a lot of information that you'll never see in a major motion picture. About Mutulu's activism, about Afeni Shakur's activism, about the FBI targeting of them. That is not something you see often, and really happy that they put that in there. They put in there one key fact, which is there's over 4,000 pages in your FBI file. Do you guys remember them saying that in the movie about Tupac? So that came from, I filed a Freedom of Information Act in May, actually in 1999, in May 2000, about a year after filing the Freedom of Information Act to get Tupac's FBI file. They got back to me in May 18th, 2000. They actually got back to me a few weeks before that, and on the phone, the woman from the Justice Department said that I can't tell you how many pages they have in the file. When I asked her how many pages am I paying to get copied, she says, I'm not allowed to tell you that. So I kept talking to her, and finally she said, well, there's over 4,000 pages you have to pay for. I was like, okay, well, thank you. And she says, and they cost 10 cents a page. It's like, all right, well, thank you. And we proceeded from there. And so she sent me this letter saying, 405 pages, $405 that it costs to copy his whole FBI file. 10 cents a page, that's over 4,000 pages, of course. And that's where, we know that there's over 4,000 pages in that file. But so this is what I finally got then, about 10 months after that, is the fact that we can only give you 99 pages of the 4,000. And even they were heavily blacked out. Even those 99 pages were heavily blacked out. A few years later, they made those 99 pages, which were also censored, free for everyone to look at. But it was just absurd what they're hiding, in the FBI file on Tupac. And so now I'm going to tell you why there was so much on Tupac in their file. So now, in my book, part of my reason for writing this whole book is to educate the next generation. I'm 52 years old, whatever, and the next generation, doesn't care to read as much about Malcolm X as I think they should, about Martha King, about Huey Newton. So I thought through Tupac, maybe they'll read about these other great leaders if they see it through that window. And it's befitting, though, because the Shakurs were the leading grassroots family in terms of activism. Sayyidin Abba Shakur was Malcolm X's close confidant. He had formerly been part of Marcus Garvey's group. Sayyidin's kids, Lumumba Shakur was the founder of the Harlem Black Panthers. Zaid Shakur was one of the founders of the Bronx Black Panthers. Mutulu Shakur, their adopted brother, founded the Republic of New Africa. Mutulu Shakur helped found Lincoln Detox in the Bronx. It was the first American-based, acupuncture treatment for drug treatment in the country. And then they trained treatment centers all over the country in using acupuncture for drug treatment. So these were the great leaders, the great Black liberation movement leaders and the great leaders in general for progressive causes, I argue. So, so hopefully through this book, people will learn more about them, and sadly, their targeting of by U.S. intelligence. Now, as I said, Afeni Shakur had married Lumumba Shakur. When Lumumba went to jail, she was elected, to be the Harlem Panther leader. She was then jailed also as part of the New York Panther 21, which was a big frame-up by the FBI's counterintelligence program. The FBI documents were stolen from an FBI office to show all that. We know all that. The Panthers had done such great community organizing, and I studied community organizing in grad school. They're considered the best community organizers in history. The American Indian movement modeled their organizing after the Black Panthers. The Young Lords, Latino version of the Black Panthers, modeled their community organizing after the Black Panthers. They had free breakfast programs, free political education programs, etc., free housing education programs, and housing rights and all that. They had a great newspaper. And so they were targeted by the FBI because the FBI, the history of the FBI and the CIA is so incredibly racist that they don't want any kind of movement like this starting up. I'm sorry. There we go. Now that's Lumumba Shakur, the founder of the Harlem Black Panthers, who Finney was married to. Sorry, that went backwards somehow. I don't know why. Go back to this. All right, let's get this moving again. There we go. So I argue that the history, when you look at the history of U.S. intelligence, with the CIA being at the top, the director, the supervisor of all the, directors of U.S. intelligence, and there's 14 plus U.S. intelligence agencies. So the FBI had their counterintelligence program targeting the Panthers, and the CIA joined in with programs like Chaos and MKUltra. And I get more into that in the second book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. But some of the first leaders to be murdered by the FBI's counterintelligence program were the LA Black Panther leaders, seen here, John Huggins and our apprentice Bunchy Carter. Sorry. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm bad with technology. Let me get this going again in just a moment. There we go. Okay. Okay, so here's one of the whistleblowers, CIA whistleblower Victor Marchetti. He was assistant director of the CIA at one point, and he said he was the only non-white Anglo-Saxon Protestant allowed in the upper leadership of the CIA. That's how bigoted they are. They wouldn't even allow a non-Protestant that high, much less a person of color. Okay, this is a book by a woman named Frances Stoner Saunders. Now, she's a British magazine editor. And I say that because the British will come out with more information than Americans will. They're allowed to come out with more. And so she exposed that U.S. intelligence was founded by these top wealthiest families in the country. The Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, the Bushes, the Harrimans. The Morgans, the J.P. Morgan family and the Rockefeller family had lawyers, which were the Dulles brothers. And so, of course, you had Allen Dulles, the longest-running CIA director. John Foster Dulles was made Secretary of State for a while. Okay. Now, why don't most people know a lot of this information? Why was Tupac so smeared? Why were the Black Panthers so smeared in the press and given, false information brought up about them, like made out to be bad people just for community organizing and self-defense. Yeah, they carried guns for self-defense. Obviously, with all the police brutality, it's arguably more. There were more murders back then than there are now, but it's hard to figure out if they were more than now. But yes, they carried guns for self-defense. They didn't want to kill police; they just wanted to defend themselves, which is everyone's natural right. And so the media. So you look at this book, The Media Monopoly by Ben Bagdicki, and he was head of the University of California, Berkeley School of Journalism. And he was doing research on the media, and he found that six multinational corporations owned 95% of the media. Okay, that's what he found. And he found that some of the ways they control our information so much is by interlocking boards of directors. And so they have I just have one page from this book, and two of our most popular magazines and corporate media owners are the New York Times and Time Incorporated, of course, Time Warner now. And the New York Times has boards of directors that also sit on the boards of directors of the defense contractors, the oil companies, the insurance companies, the banks, and that's why they censor so much information, and that's why they run psychological warfare operations through the press. Now, Francis Stoner Saunders, whose book I showed you before, went through the letters of Charles Douglas Jackson, C.D. Jackson. C.D. Jackson was a vice president of Time Warner, of Time Incorporated, before it became Time Warner, of Time Incorporated, and went back and forth between being a CIA architect and also head of psychological warfare under President Truman to being vice president of Time. So he ran the psychological warfare operations and CIA operations through Times magazines. Time had many magazines and many other media properties, okay? And that's the way it works. That's some of how it works. Now here's another example of how the CIA controlled the media. This is by a Watergate muckraker, Carl Bernstein. And he came out with this article after Watergate. He was famous at that point, and the only place he could publish this is Rolling Stone magazine. This article, The CIA and the Media. And all he was doing was covering church committees, U.S. Senate church committees' investigation of the CIA and the media. And in this, he finds, he just shows how well over 400 members of the media live dual lives in their work with the CIA. And we're not just talking about random journalists, we're talking about the owners of the media, who we list here. Okay, you can see Columbia Broadcasting System, that's CBS, Time Incorporated, New York Times, this Louisville Courier Journal, Copley News Service, which was a bigger Associated Press back then. American Broadcasting Corporation, of course, ABC, Associated Press, United Press International, Hearst, all these other media companies are just examples of some of the people that were dually working for the CIA. Okay, that's why they, smeared the Black Panthers. That's why they continue to run psychological warfare operations that smear people like Tupac. Okay, so another book showing how our called Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman. You can see Chomsky's name under Herman, and about the political economy and the mass media. And shoot, I did it again. I'm so sorry, guys. Let me get back here. Okay. So he says, Chomsky and Herman say that an armed Forces Journal survey revealed that the Pentagon was publishing a total of 371 magazines in 1971. Okay, by 1982 they increased it to 1,200 magazines. So the Pentagon is publishing 1,200 magazines. What are these magazines? We don't know. It's all classified. But if you look at Barnes & Noble, you see all those magazines. It's obviously they're publishing most of our magazines. That's how they can express information, because they're the actual funders of most of the magazines out there, and that's how they censor so much information, and why it's so hard for us to get this kind of information out there. Guys, I'm so sorry. This is just little off, and I'm going to get it back on in a moment. It's just hard to see where to press the right spot when it's clicker's down there, but okay. Try to keep it right there. Now, so some of the other people trying to get the word out there is a good friend of Martin King's named William Pepper. William Pepper, at the time, was a journalist and uncovered some of the pictures of the atrocities in Vietnam. Martin Luther King saw those pictures and saw his articles on the Vietnam atrocities and befriended William Pepper. William Pepper and Martin Luther King tried to start a third party to run for the 1968 presidential election, where Dr. Benjamin Spock, the famous baby doctor, was going to run for president. He was a big anti-war guy, and Martin Luther King was going to be the vice president. That was sabotaged by U.S. intelligence. But they, after King was assassinated, William Pepper, people close to King, of course, asked William Pepper, became a lawyer after that, to investigate his assassination, and he came out with 2 books. This is one of them, Active State, and this Active State covers the trial of 1999, where the King family won a case against William Dowers, the owner of the boarding house from where the shots came from that killed Martin Luther King, and said the government were co-collaborators with that man in assassinating Martin Luther King. Okay, and of course the press completely twisted and contorted that trial as if William Pepper was some Southern racist lawyer trying to clear James Earl Ray. Okay, there's Pepper and King. Now this is just a U.S. intelligence document of some special forces agents who gave Pepper their orders to be the backup snipers in case the assassins of Martin Luther King weren't successful. They would be backup snipers to fire further shots to make sure it's successful. And so he had his people on the inside interpret that for him, and he had the interpretation in that book. Okay, this is was identified as CIA agents jumping down from where the shots came from when King was assassinated, within minutes of King being assassinated in Memphis. Now, this is, it says Project MK Ultra, the CIA's program of research and behavioral modification. This is a document of another Senate committee that investigated the way the CIA then used drugs with Project MK Ultra to target activists and musicians. And that gets more into my second book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. But of course, people like Huey Newton and Afeni Shakur and a number of musicians were targeted with drugs, and I argue that was directly coming from U.S. intelligence doing that. Here's a page from a book about the targeting of the Black Panthers. Here's some of the FBI offices, where this is an FBI document that shows that they were targeting Black Panthers in many different cities, in different FBI offices where some of this targeting was happening. Okay, and this is Geronimo Pratt. That's Tupac's godfather. Now, and guys, so the movie All Eyes on Me was good, showed a lot. It didn't present the fact that people like Geronimo Pratt he was head of the Los Angeles Black Panthers, and he was also Tupac's godfather. Asad Shakur was considered a leader of the Bronx, one of the top women in the Bronx Black Panthers, and she was Tupac's godmother. So he had a major extended family of political mentors who were Black Panthers and great Black leaders. Now, these are the white police officers who are carrying Fred Hampton, the head of the Chicago Black Panthers, out of his home after he was shot, and it was ordered by the FBI's counterintelligence program for these police to raid his home. This is another source for some information. It's Bill Agee, a CIA whistleblower who wrote the book Inside the Company, the CIA Diary. He also started that magazine where I first published the article in the FBI War on Tupac, Covert Action Quarterly. Yeah, I'm glad you've heard of him. Glad you know him. Here's Tupac and his birth certificate. And this is a small detail about Tupac's life, but as you can see from his birth certificate, Tupac Amaru Shakur, this crap with Lassane Parish Crooks, have you seen that stupid name they pretend like he was born as? It's ridiculous. Where does that come from? That's just made up. It's just some strange thing that they make up about Tupac. Here's Tupac with Mutulu Shakur, and I believe that's Maurice Mopreme Shakur, who was his stepbrother, Mutulu's biological son, because Mutulu was, as I said before, was Lumumba's adopted brother. Now, Lumumba and Afeni divorced when they were in prison, and Afeni ended up moving in with Mutulu several years later. Now, this is a page from a lawsuit, which was in New York City. When Afeni came out of prison, she joined a lot of other activists in following a lawsuit against the police, New York Police's program that was targeting Black Panthers and other activists, which was part of the FBI's counterintelligence program. This is, of course, Tupac's godmother, Saj Shakur, who was given political haven in Cuba. It's another page from the lawsuit that lasted about 10 years, and I believe you got some good Black activists that joined that lawsuit, like Michael Warren and Sonny Carson. Michael Warren was Tupac Shakur's New York trial lawyer. Mutulu. Okay, here is another page from an FBI file. I believe this is in Los Angeles, about the Los Angeles Black Panthers. Okay, guys, this is Paul Robeson Jr. Now, my second book talks about Paul Robeson more than my first book, because Paul Robeson Sr., I hope everyone knows. If you don't know him, he is one of the most incredible men in history, I argue. He can speak over 20 languages. He was considered the world's greatest singer, a top actor. He was an All-American football player. He went to Columbia University Law School. Just an absolutely incredible man. And so he was in Russia, and he was 3 weeks away from speaking with Fidel Castro and Che Guevara right after the revolution had happened in Cuba. And shortly before, the Bay of Pigs was going to happen in Cuba, where the U.S. invaded Cuba with their, the agents that they paid, the Cuban agents. But so in this, when he's in a Russian hotel, there were some Americans staying in the room next to him. They had a party. They invited him to the party. They insisted he come in. He just stopped in for a moment, and they gave him a drink. He just took a sip, and he was dosed with a mega dose of psychedelics, of LSD or BZ, as his son said, Paul Robeson Jr. Paul Robeson Jr. was already an adult. He came to visit him in Russia to see what had happened, and he got dosed himself they put something in his drink. And so this was part of the CIA's Project MKUltra. They were attacking activists with drugs, particularly LSD and other psychedelics, but also, of course, heroin, cocaine, any drug you can name, they used in different ways against, some of the great people in our society, but all of us, I argue. Okay, this is just a page from the newspaper about the riots. This is the LA riots. Now, after the LA riots, it showed that heroin came flooding in to communities in the 1960s from the Vietnam area, which is considered the golden triangle for poppy fields that produce heroin, opiates, and other opiates. And so they flooded cities that were rioting. We call them race rebellions. They were flooding the cities to quell the masses with these drugs, to get the drugs, particularly in communities of color that were active, like for civil rights and against the Vietnam War. And here's a great researcher. This professor, Alfred McCoy, spent many years researching the politics of heroin. He says the CIA complicity in the global drug trade. And he shows the exact people that were working with the CIA to get the opiates and heroin, the opium from the Vietnam area into the United States and into other countries. And so here's the great leaders that were assassinated in the 1960s. And what did they have in common? They were all trying to stop the Vietnam War. JFK made a sea change, and he announced he was going to be pulling troops out of Vietnam just before he died, and the orders were put in place, and that was recorded. Malcolm X was the first, arguably the first man in the country to organize mass protests against the Vietnam War. JFK, William Pepper says, died exactly 1 year after he officially announced publicly that he was opposed to the Vietnam War and was organizing against the Vietnam War. And Robert F. Kennedy had said he was against the Vietnam War, and of course, once he won the California primary, which was the biggest primary, and they thought he would, that assured him the presidential, the Democratic nomination, he was assassinated. And I show the evidence of how U.S. intelligence was behind that assassination. Behind all those assassinations. This is Ramsey Clark. He was U.S. Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson in 1967, 68. And he actually became a radical activist in his later years, thankfully. And so he told me, I asked him at a conference in 1991, what do you think that the government uses drugs for? And he says he thinks the government uses drugs to sedate and divide the masses. And he implied, of course, U.S. intelligence was doing that. Here's Tupac. Here's, of course, Tupac's first 6 films that he made while in his short life. 25 years he died. Died at 25 years old. Now, people don't realize, they didn't say it in All Eyes on Me. You probably can't read it too many places except for my book. But Tupac was already a national black leader before he became a rapper. When he was 17 and 18 years old, he headed the New African Panthers. Okay? He was chairman of the New African Panther Party in 1988, and they were active in 8 to 10 cities around the country. So, of course, when he added wealth and fame and influence to that radical activism, of course, the new counterintelligence program would target him. And, FBI whistleblowers such as M. Wasn't Swearing In has said, he was part of the COINTELPRO in the 60s, and he said that they continued COINTELPRO at least into the 1990s, just using different names. Okay, here's M. Wasn't Swearing In's book, FBI Secrets and Agents Expose, where he says that. And here's the page of him actually saying that. Okay, code word, COINTELPRO is FBI code word for an unconscious program, whatever. Unconscionable is what he says here. Unconscionable program was officially in operation, documented on paper from August 1956 to April 71. The program is still in operation today, but under a different code name. This is Watani Tayahimba. Okay, that's Tupac. That was Tupac's business manager. Another problem with All Eyes on Me was that they said Atron Gregory was his business manager throughout his career, and Atron was his first business manager, but that was just in the very beginning. He then made Watani his business manager after that early start. And Watani was a former Black Panther. He was the co-founding member of the New African People's Organization, and as the National Security Director, and was Tupac's lifelong political mentor and Afeni Shakur's close friend. Here's another close mentor of Tupac's was Chokwe Lumumba, who was the head of the New African People's Organization, the co-founding director of the New African People's Organization, NAPO. And he was elected the mayor of Mississippi a few years ago, if you guys might remember. He was like the great radical mayor of I'm sorry, I forget the name of the town now, Jackson, Mississippi. And then his son now got elected mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, which is a great victory. Yeah. And here's Tupac's first 2 albums. Now, sometime around his first album coming out, he decided to make a plan with his stepfather Mutulu, who was in prison, and sadly still in prison, even though he should have been released in, it was 2016. He was due for release. He'd done out his time, but they wouldn't let him out of prison, obviously for political reasons. But they came up with a plan, the Thug Life Plan, which was about Tupac pretending to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them, but also to politicize rappers and to extend the Bloods versus Crips peace truce that Tupac's extended Black Panther family had helped come about. Okay, they got the Bloods and Crips in Los Angeles, the leaders of the Bloods and Crips, to call peace truces and start fighting racism and turning more into activism. And that started spreading throughout California and then spreading throughout the country. Sure. The New African People's Organization, they're still around. They're still active. Yeah. They just chose to use different means in the Black Panthers where they want to be very low key and not be public, to not bring on the once level of U.S. intelligence attacks. Yeah. So there's a picture of the Bloods and Crips peace truce. This is the code of thug life that Tupac and Mutulu wrote up in jail. And so Tupac would go to what they called gang peace truce picnics and say that the leaders of the gangs would have to assign to this code of thug life in order to reduce the harm that the gangs were doing in the communities, and then shake hands and call truces. And so Tupac helped facilitate that at different places. Okay, this is just a page from an article by a guy named Mike Davis, who wrote a best-selling book called City of Courts. He wrote for a magazine called The New Left Review. The fact that he wrote about the Bloods and Crips peace truce and said how there was a 100-agent-strong FBI task force watching that very closely, and how they were, trying to basically, they were arresting the gang truce leaders such as Dwayne Holmes, Truce's key architect, and they arrested him for saying he stole $10 during a gang peace truce picnic, and they put him in jail and served him 7 years in prison on a trumped up $10 robbery. Okay, so that's what they started doing. They started framing up the gang peace truce, leaders, and so they were very concerned about Tupac helping facilitate these events. This is an article from Connie Brooks, the New Yorker, called "The Takedown of Tupac," and which actually revealed a whole lot of stuff, which was very good. One of the things she revealed is that the lawyer. Now, when I first started talking, you might have heard me say that Tupac was shot in a recording studio lobby in 1994, the end of November 1994 in New York. Well, he thinks, and he was also in charge of sexual abuse a year earlier. And the person that set up that sexual abuse was a gay man named Jacques Agnant. Okay. Now, if you know Tupac's music, he has a song where he says, "Let me lace this rap about a snitch named Haitian Jack, knew he was working for the feds, set me up, wet me up." And so Haitian Jack is Jacques Agnant. Okay. He went by different names in some of the interviews, like Nigel, aliases, but he was he come from Haiti. He was a music promoter, and he befriended Tupac out of nowhere. He introduces Tupac to this woman. If you saw the All Eyes on Me movie, of course, many witnesses said she gave him a blowjob in the middle of the club, and then other she admitted in court that she did that, and so then they had sex that night, consensual sex. 2-3 nights later, Agnes sets up for her to be with him again, and he's with her for a bit in court. Now I have the court documents saying they both say it was, that these things happened. But Tupac said this was consensual, and sorry about the racing about your childhood. So they said it was consensual, So Tupac said it was consensual. She said it wasn't consensual. All Tupac knows is that something in the drink that Agnew had given him had him just pass out like a certain few minutes after he was with her. And he wakes up to her screaming at him, saying, "How could you let your friends do this to me?" And it was Agnes, an associate of Agnes, that did something to her. We don't know what. But she proceeds to say that Tupac raped her, actually just sexually, that forced her to give him, have oral sex with him. And they leveled a bunch of other charges in that case. Tupac, the case was going so bad for the prosecutors that the prosecutors said, we're gonna offer a mistrial because we forgot to give one picture to the defense, Tupac's defense. Tupac said, I'm not gonna accept a mistrial because this case is ridiculous. This is a big frame up. And so right before it was the verdict was gonna come out, Tupac is shot twice in the back of the skull, and bullets come out the front of the skull. Now, sorry, I'm just gonna fast forward this. Here's a Haitian. This is Haitian Jack Agnon. Now, another aspect of it is there's tons of police foul play and prosecution foul play. This woman left a message saying that the police said they accidentally erased for Tupac, and it was really, she was saying, I like the way you F-U-C-K and all that, and so they said they accidentally erased the tape that exonerates Tupac of, unconsensual sex with her. But, and so, anyway, first thing I'll just say, Tupac gets convicted, not of forced, sexual, not of forced sodomy, not of assisting forced sodomy, not of attempting forced sodomy, but only of touching the buttocks of the complainant once, and Asian Jacques Agnon touching her buttocks twice. Okay, so for that, Agnon gets a misdemeanor. Tupac gets up to 4 years in jail. It's obviously very political. They were trying to get him in jail. And I'm going to get into this in a moment, but so just before the verdict, though, Tupac shot 5 times in this New York recording studio lobby. And I have the affidavit in my book. You can see a copy of the doctor's affidavit that was presented in court that 2 bullets went through the back of his skull and 2 bullets came out the front of the skull. And they miraculously missed his brain. So it was very miraculous that he survived that. But he was, that was a murder attempt. Now, someone confessed to it. A guy named Dexter Isaac said, I was paid to kill Tupac Shakur. A guy named Jimmy Henchman Rosemont paid me a lot of money to kill Tupac Shakur. And a documentary filmmaker gave me a government page, saying that Jimmy Henchman Rosemont had agreed to work with prosecution and police as an informant around the same time, around the mid-1990s, all right? And when police came to the recording studio and talked to the security guy about, do you have any film? He said, basically the security guy said, we have videotape of the whole incident of Tupac shooting, and here it is. And the police turned down that videotape and closed the case. So here's Tupac and Biggie. They were friends. There was not an East Coast, West Coast rivalry between them. That was manufactured by the media, manufactured by undercover agents. They did that versus Black Panthers. They split up different Black Panther leaders and, against each other in the same way with fake letters. They did that to Tupac with fake, anonymous letters saying, oh, of course, Biggie was the one that set you up. People in prison said, oh, everyone knows that Biggie set you up. And they did that too when Tupac's mother, Dana Shakur, was in prison, and Huey Newton was in prison. They were doing the same things to them with fake letters, and I've got documents to show their tactics and how they did all that. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. I just want to show you something. If I can get this to go back. Now, this document, you can't see up here, but it says penal coercion, okay? This is Amnesty International and a sociologist analyzed what they call penal coercion. Okay, penal coercion are techniques that Amnesty International says the closest thing U.S. intelligence has to brainwashing. Now, I would argue that they have something closer to brainwashing than just this, but I show how they used every one of these techniques on Tupac while he was in prison to mess his mind up as much as they possibly can. And they did that to get him to turn on his friend Biggie and think that Biggie might have set up the shooting, and to get him to sign the death row records. Okay. Now, so they did even more than these tactics. They also made him have cavity searches when anyone visited him, even though they watched the whole visit. When people visit him in jail, it was sticking their gloved fingers up his buttocks. It was horrible what they did to him when he was in prison. They messed his head up as much as possible. So he was not the same person when he came out of prison. His close friend Jada Pinkett Smith said that. He was full of life before prison. After prison, he was just darkness because he was just so abused in prison. Now, why were they trying to get him to join Death Row Records? Oh shoot. Sorry guys, let me get this back up. All right, let's fast forward this. In a moment. So, turns out the reason they were getting him to join Death Row Records was the fact that this police detective, this white police detective, got himself inserted into the investigation of Biggie Smalls' murder. And because it was related to another murder he was investigating. And so he came to find that there's dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of Death Row Records. And he asked his white superiors, what are they doing there? So they thought he'd be in on it all. And they said, we can consider them troubleshooters or covert agents. Okay? He repeated that to journalist Randall Sullivan, who wrote about it in his book, Labyrinth. Now, he wasn't down with that, and he tried to investigate the fact that his fellow police agents, actually what he came to find is that they helped set up Tupac's murder as well as Biggie's murder. And they set up Biggie's murder as collateral damage to throw the scent of what really happened to Tupac off of it and make it look like an East Coast versus West Coast war. When he tried to come out with this information that his fellow police officers helped set up Tupac's murder, they demoted him, and then he had to resign from the force and hold a press conference to try to get the information out there. And now he's now dead. And before he died, he supposedly died having a heart attack as he's giving new information on Tupac's murder to the police department when he's retired. Okay, and he died at the meeting. They say. So. It's very suspicious, but there's lots of evidence that. So here's his superiors saying, Death Row weren't considered security guards, these police officers, these cops in Death Row. They were more like confidants or troubleshooters or covert agents. Okay. Now, this Tupac, when he was in prison, said he was getting stoned every day. He was smoking weed every day, and he was drinking all the time, and his brain was just numb. And he hated himself for doing that, and that he was so stoned when he got shot in New York recording studio lobby that he should have known that was a setup, and he should have avoided that. Okay, and it was Associate Agnans who helped set that up. Okay, and Agnan, Haitian Jack Agnan, it turns out he had a long rap sheet. Michael Warren is that Tupac's activist trial lawyer in New York got someone inside the probation department to give him Agnan's rap sheet. It's a long rap sheet. He said major cases up and down the East Coast all dismissed. He said that's a sure sign of an FBI undercover agent. All right. So when Tupac was in jail, though, he said, I can't believe I was smoking so much weed. I'm not smoking weed anymore. You know, I'm giving up. I'm not going to numb myself with alcohol and weed anymore. And, you know, and then as soon as he gets out of jail, you might not have seen it in All Eyes on Me, but inside this case of money that he gives him as soon as he comes out of jail is also a bag of weed, big bag of weed. So they threw weed at him constantly had him smoking weed and drinking to try to, you know, mess his head up. And then towards the end of his life, he was giving it up though. Now I argue there's some reasons why they had Tupac promote weed so much and push weed so much. And Michelle Alexander, you might have heard of before, great. She was a Georgetown law professor. I'm not sure where she's working now, but she wrote this great book, The New Jim Crow. When people are smoking weed, particularly people of color, it's easy to get them on possession charges and lock them up. And that's what they're doing en masse. They're locking up people for small charges like weed possession en masse. And so if you popularize it through someone like Tupac, you then can just, you know, just charge everyone who gets involved in it whenever you want with these charges and get them locked up. Besides the fact that, you know, kids, you know, and still in middle school or high school starting to smoke weed are dropping out. They're just not doing their work. They're getting lazier. I knew how that was myself. I'm glad I got out of high school, but it was risky when I was smoking weed at one point every day. It was terrible. And I'm so glad I got that out of my life, away from that. But so many people I counsel now. I work as a drug and alcohol counselor and counsel on other issues also. And I'm seeing so many young people, particularly people of color, who are smoking weed all the time and just not doing well in school and aren't making it. They're not going to, you know, have the grades for college, and it's very sad. And it's sad that Tupac was role modeling that. But before he died, he had gotten away from that, and he started sobering up. And people around him said that everyone else was drinking and smoking at parties, and he wouldn't touch anything at the parties. Like Russell Simmons said that. Now this is an award-winning filmmaker named Nick Broomfield. He did a good movie called Biggie and Tupac. That revealed a lot. Okay, Tupac Resurrection, of course, was one of the best films of Tupac. Yeah, that was great. That came straight from Afeni Shakur. That was the best one on his life and his activism and the positive side of him. I think that Biggie and Tupac revealed a whole lot about all the police officers at all levels of Death Row Records. About the fact that Reggie Wright Sr. was head of the Compton Gang Division. Reggie Wright Jr. was head of security for Death Row Records. Both police officers, and Compton was one of the first places the gang peace truces started. Okay, in Compton and a few other neighborhoods, they got the gang, the Bloods and Crips leaders together to call peace truces and turn on to activism. And so they were trying to stop those gang peace truces inside Death Row Records. Okay, that was one purpose of Death Row Records. It was a U.S. intelligence front company. All right. Another purpose of Death Row Records was to traffic drugs, traffic guns, and also set up Tupac's murder. Okay. Now, this is I was just showing a picture of Tupac with the medallion on. This is the medallion he was wearing right before he died. And that is Euthanasia Records. That's his logo. He was leaving Death Row Records. He would not wear a Death Row Records medallion anymore. He switched to a medallion of his new label, Euthanasia, which he started with Black Panther Yasmin Fula, who was a close comrade of Afeni Shakur's. Okay, this is an article where Russell Simmons says all this gangster stuff about Tupac in his last months. All this gangster stuff, I never seen that. I remember him dancing while with this woman in a wheelchair for 4 hours when everyone else was drinking and partying. That's how I knew the man. He's a total sophisticated, intelligent, articulate. Okay, that's what he remembers about Tupac. There's Tupac towards the end of his life. He was engaged to Quincy Jones's daughter, Kadena Jones. So he's going to add much more money, wealth, and fame and influence to his life. And he was settling down. They planned to move in together. They planned to have kids together. That's Kevin Haki, a whistleblower who was being paid by the FBI. He says the FBI were in the motorcade when Tupac was shot. Okay. That's Mike Tyson, and that's Kevin Haki behind Tupac as one of his top bodyguards. Kevin Haki also told Tupac not to go to Vegas, and that he was killed. And so when of course, Reggie Wright Jr. and Suge Knight, heads of Death Row Records, found out about it, and Dave Kenner, the real owner of Death Row Records, a white lawyer, they fired Kevin Haki right before Vegas. There's Tupac's murder. Yeah, the murder card is a biggie. I told you he was collateral damage to take the eyes off of who really killed Tupac. And his Jam Master Jay, they said he got into activism before he died. And his shooting was also caught on videotape, surveillance video. And the police took the surveillance video in that case, but didn't do anything with it. Closed down the case. And this is just a picture of ecstasy. And it's in regards to my second book, because it talks about ecstasy. Have what's called brain damage, everybody hurts memory. And this is the head of chemical and biological warfare for South Africa, who was bound to have trafficked tons of ecstasy. Okay. And it's Fred Hampton Jr., Fred Hampton Sr.'s son, of course, and he was he's a great activist who was framed up and put in jail, but now he's out, and he runs a group called the Prisoners of Conscience Committee. And he voted forward for my book, but he's just a great national activist who I highly recommend people look at and hear his speeches. This is POCC, Prisoners of Conscience Committee, and this just covers my books again. And guys, if you have an interest in, so guys, I also have a film condensation in the book. It's about an hour and 20 minutes, just gives the a lot of images you see here and more images about the topic that FBI war on Tupac Shakur and black leaders. But thanks so much for listening to all that, and now we're going to answer questions about it all.
We're going to panel.
Sure.
We're going to panel discussion. Bring up chairs here.
And that's
That's it. All right. Let's give them a hand, everybody. All right. All right, so we're gonna now go into our panel discussion. I know Eric just got a flu. Oh, okay. All right, so we're gonna bring up both Brother Hakeem from Black and Nobel. The Black and Nobel crew's in the house. Let's give it up for her. All right, now Eric, yes. Sister Ari Squires has a film and working on another film, and she actually was working with the Tupac Resurrection film. So that's awesome. We can talk about that. And of course, we'll have John Potash. All right, I put some questions together and we can add on. And of course, if you all have any inputs, we certainly will love to go to you. But first, let me just allow for both of them. I just posted All Eyes on Me, Real or Fake. Like to add anything to that? What would you like to add? What did you all think about it, first of all?
The film All Eyes on Me, Real or Fake. I think whenever you're doing that type of film, there's going to be real and fake, right? I think we can agree to that. But I think it was a good representation of who Tupac was, but I don't think it was enough. As Haki said, I worked as an intern at MTV on the documentary Resurrection, and having to log hours and hours and hours and hours of interviews and video and stuff that Afeni Shakur had given us, I was able to see Tupac from a much deeper personal level, and I don't think that was portrayed in the film All Eyes on Me, but I'm very appreciative of the film and all films on Tupac, because I think we get all different perspectives. So to answer the question, I think it was both. Hopefully that helps.
Great answer. I love the movie because I realized that if you let history go too far down the road, it will be forgotten. and you skip generations, and then people can just make up anything. It's been about what 20 years, so I think that it was an excellent movie myself. Um, for the people or the younger people that didn't know or get to see Tupac in action, it gives them an idea of who he was. I think they portrayed him more as an entertainer, and it was much deeper than that. But I liked it. I really did. I heard a lot of negative comments, but I actually went to see it twice so I could get, the real depth of it. And it was good to me. I got chills a few times. I just have to agree with her. Real and fake, but when you're dealing with film, we all see different. Everybody has different perceptions. I really liked it a lot. Being as though I grew up in that era, it gave me a sense of what hip hop once was, dealing with hip hop right now. So, a lot of the stuff that's happening now, it didn't just start, and it didn't just start with Tupac. I mean, you could go all the way back to Jimi Hendrix and other people in different genres. When you're talking about the drugs and different things like that, the same things are happening now. So it's nothing new under the sun. I think it was real more than fake.
Yeah, I loved All Eyes on Me too, but I also loved Tupac Resurrection because that was in his words and it was probably more personal. But I just love the fact that All Eyes on Me could get out the message, even if it was simply put that he had a target on his back for being a national leader. And people don't realize that. They don't realize what an activist he was. Now, of course, they could have had more on the activism, but one of the things I wanted to say about both movies is when Tupac Resurrection came into Baltimore, I was living in Baltimore when I saw it, and it left the theaters within probably 2 weeks. Okay, it was incredible how quickly they took it out of the theaters. With All Eyes on Me, they took it out of the theaters in about 4 or 5 weeks. It went from, and to start, it was only in 60% of the theaters. If you looked at the other big blockbusters of the summer, because it was considered the blockbuster of the summer, the other ones were in about over 4,000, different movie screens. And Tupac, All Eyes on Me was on 2,500. Why? I argue the reason was that the Carlyle Group, which was a Reagan-Bush dominated group, that bought out, they owned one of the largest theater chains in the country, and they bought out one of the other top 3 theater chains. So they owned 2 of the top 3 theater chains in the country, Carlyle Group. And
Is the Carlyle Group the defense DOD?
Yes.
And they own theaters too?
Yes, they own movie theaters.
Yeah.
And that's how they could keep All Eyes on Me from being in more theaters, like as many theaters as the big blockbusters that were in 4,000 plus theaters, plus how they could probably persuade other theaters to kick it out after 4 weeks. Whereas some film like I don't know, Beguiled or 27 Yards Deep or whatever it was, some other films weren't making as much money as Tupac as All Eyes on Me, but they were in theaters, for 6, 7, 8 weeks, 1,000 theaters or more, 1,000 screens or more. And that's what they do. And another thing that happened, of course, is all the media slammed it. 80 to 90% of the media said this is a bad movie. They use different reasons, but they use all kinds of ridiculous reasons for saying this is a bad movie. And, so they smeared him in death like they smear him in life. That's what they do. So they didn't want you to see that radical part of his history. And the final thing I'll just say about the movie was, it's too bad they didn't show that Watani Himbo was his real businessman, was his manager, not Atron Gregory. But that, when you get a $40 million budget, you're gonna have producers saying, well, we can't have these radical people talked about in the movie. That's what they do, and that's a major motion picture. But because it's very censored. It's the big money, budget media is very censored. We're lucky we got Tupac Resurrection, and we're lucky we did get the content we did in All Eyes on Me, I say. So, yeah. Oh, and I'll just say real quickly, guys, there was at least 5 attempts to murder Tupac by U.S. intelligence before he was actually murdered. And so they showed that a bit in All Eyes on Me, and that's good. They didn't show it in the exact way. For example, in Atlanta, when the police the supposedly off-duty police officers shot at him, he didn't come out of his car. He yelled out the window and said, what's going on over there? Eyewitnesses said that these white, plainclothes guys ran over to his car, smashed his car window, and shot at him. And they shot at him with a gun they stole from the police evidence locker. So that is, obviously an assassination attempt. That's just one of the few examples of what happened to Tupac.
All right, so let's look at one of the panelists. She didn't make it, but I thought about this for her. She's actually in the Baltimore market, but maybe Brother Hakeem can add on this. In terms of hip hop music now and then, what would you say would be the difference? I know you work with a lot of artists in Philadelphia area, and you've worked on some films as well. So can you just add to that? Sure. Hip hop now is probably more animated, and it's like a dream world type of music, and the frequencies that the younger people are on is more like mesmerizing, and most of the times when I go to the studio, and I'm sure most people that go to studios can agree with me, everybody's heavily sedated, whether it's alcohol, blunts, weed, pills, other things. So the music comes out that way. And, back when I was coming up in the late 80s, early 90s, it was more, conscious, where more people were reading. You can just hear it in the lyrics, the way it came out. Whereas though now it's all about getting high, party, and BS. So they had a little of that in the 80s and 90s, but now that's all you hear. I have 5 children, and 2 of them are very young, 9 and 5. And we travel to school every morning, and we may have the radio on, and it's a really popular song out as we speak right now. It's been running for about 9 months straight. And it's all about Percocets, and it's like the radio version. They say represent, represent, and the actual real words is Percocet, Percocet. So, I found myself nodding my head to it. Yeah, it's the frequency, but then because the rhythms, it catches us, and we love the rhythms, just the people that we are. And when you put those type of words on top, it's very dangerous, because subliminally, you get mesmerized, get hypnotized, and everything else. So my 9 and 5-year-old, I'm sure they don't know what Percocets are. So it just preps them, for destruction. And the times we're in, we have to combat that, because if not, we're doomed, because my children are very, very intelligent, but they love the music. They love to dance, and that's out of pure innocence. So we have some work to do. I don't really know, other than having the bookstore, how to compete with it. But back then, it was really more about having fun and learning, and now it's just all about I don't know. It's like when I used to listen to the Wu-Tang and Nas and other people like that, they were able to merge the street life along with knowledge. So they gave you 2 sides of it, and now it's more like, it's all streets, it's all prison, it's all, you know, death. It's dark, you know, and we have a lot of work to do because the children are definitely, they love it, you know, and they don't even know what it is. So us as the adults have a lot of work to do. And explaining is just not enough because they're not around us 24 hours a day. So, you know, I just think that, you know, we have some work to do, and this is the type of forums that will get the message out that we are competing with some higher powers. And I think that when you go into these studios, that's actually how it's created. It's created through being high, and just like when you're high, you in this dream world, you're thinking that you're on top, you know. So even before they make it to the top in their minds, you know, they want it so fast. You know, when back then you had to work hard, not just as an artist, but just to get where you need to go. You know, they want the Mercedes Benz like in 2 months. You know, you have people that have been working their whole life and haven't had a chance to ride a Mercedes Benz. So we got to snap out of it and give these producers and record label execs a smack on the face.
If you don't mind if I add on to that just a little, because I too, you know, I think that it was the same back in the day when, because I hung out with a lot of rappers in studios back in, you know, C-Roll, E40, and, you know, out from Sacramento, California, and that's all they was doing in the studio, was drinking, getting high, girls. I don't think that part has changed much. But to go back to, it's funny because what you were saying is so true. I have my 10-year-old son here, Amari, say hello. And I talk to him, like I said, all the time, but I give him both the negative and the positive, because I think what we're hearing on the radio with the drugs and the streets, that's reality. And I think a lot of these rappers that those that are in charge are letting us put out in the community is actually the people's reality. And so I think we have to just know how to talk about both of those things, but put our children and our young people and ourselves around more things like this, where we're exposing people to, okay, yes, that's reality, that is people like, but I don't think we as adults who actually grew up with hip hop, and I grew up with Dr. Dre and, you know, Sugar Free and, you know, all these Bay Area rappers, and we was smoking weed in the club, partying, you know, that was just reality as a young person. But as an older person, we have to understand that this is just the new generation, so we can't come down on them too hard, but I think we should balance it out with more of what's positive and what's going on, and how can we balance that out is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's important, to not come down too hard on them, because when we were younger, we were rocking to that stuff too, but we did have more conscious rap, like let's see, minus so many, EPMD, KRS-One, you know, but we have to remember too that it's our responsibility to tap into that. There's still a lot of underground conscious rappers, and they're doing it. Just go to YouTube, you know, get out of just listening to the radio, because we have to remember the people that are in charge, they're putting that in our children's faces. So we just have to be more mindful of that.
All right. Kind of answered some of the questions here. So let's talk about the film industry. I'm gonna get to some of the questions here. The film industry and the African American community. And when I had this question, I had Dr. Jared Ball in mind. He's a professor at Morgan State. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it here, but Sister Ari has a film out as well, and she went to the African American Film Festival. You know, I thought it was good that John Potash is working, you know, on his film project. So in terms of, you know, various films that are coming out, and maybe you can add on, Brother Hakeem, you know, do you perceive that many of these films are, you know, creating these destructive messages?
I think so, but I think it's because those that are in power are putting them out there to destruct us as a Black community. You know, they're just putting it out there for us. So I think me as a filmmaker, it's my responsibility to put out positivity and upliftment and consciousness and Black power and community and organization to my people. So yes, I think that the films are doing a horrible job at positivity, but I mean, I remember when I reached out to Centra TV MTV, which is BET, which is of course owned by Viacom. They didn't want anything positive. It was too positive. This upliftment of women and children and Black people is too positive. Yeah, they always want to know what the drama is. Who, you know, it has to be drama based, but that's because of people in charge. That's what they think people want to see. But I have done my research, I've done my study, and that's not what people want to see. So it's our responsibility, everybody in here, especially as filmmakers and producers and writers and authors, it's our responsibility to go just as hard for our people as the people who are empowered to do.
I'll just say that, yeah, it's just incredible that the way Hollywood's controlled. It's very sad. I mean, it's getting more and more controlled all the time. But there just, you know, there appears to be a connection with Hollywood and U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon. And one of those connections was revealed by an author named Dave McGowan. He talked about Lookout Mountain Studios. It was the largest, most self-contained film studio in the world in Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles, and it produced 19,000 films, and it was classified, and everyone who worked on those films had to sign, you know, confidentiality agreements, and some of the top names in Hollywood, directors, actors, etc., were in these films. It was said to stop in '69, as some people say. It kept going. Probably moved to other studios, but we don't know what the names are, but they're probably some of the biggest names, you know, biggest film names in the country, and they probably still are being controlled. This was an Air Force owned studio, and they were putting out 19,000 films with people like Walt Disney and John Ford and, you know, Peter Fonda and all these different people. It's very sad how our industry is so controlled. So thank God for filmmakers that are trying to do such positive films like Ari. And, you know, we try to do things a different way. We try to get the word out a different way. And so I put out this FBI War Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders film. It just selling it low key on Amazon. But thankfully, a lot of people have seen it. I know that. And for my next book, I did a higher level film, but you know, who knows? It's just very hard to get the word out there. And but you know, I didn't allow it to be copied free on YouTube for 3 years. I allowed people to see it for free, and now I made people take it down for the moment because just, you know, I gotta sell some of these films. But you know, it's just a different way of getting the word out there. But you know, obviously the books are easier because they're lower, they're, you know, less expensive to make. So.
I think that we all can become filmmakers now. That's the good thing about the internet, is that we don't have to rely on Hollywood. You know, you have so many different platforms, and then it makes you wonder, you know, who's in control of the platforms. You know, it's bigger than Hollywood now, because I don't think anybody's really watching TV anymore. You know, we're all like this, even in our own bedrooms. So it's kind of like, you know, we have the control, so we have to take total control. And just like most people I'm looking at now have their mobile devices out, we can change things through this. This is the new economy, the new world order. This is the big eye in the sky, the chips. It's all right in our hands. So let's take control while we can, before all this stuff gets regulated and then we don't have it. And that's what's going to happen. When this freeze happens, people are going to panic. They're not going to know how to live without these things. So now that we have the control, we have to take total control and not depend on television, because it was always said, you know, in our bookstore and other places where we build, that it's tell, lie, vision. So we can't really think that that's real at all. When you look at a movie or television, know that somebody's making some things up, especially with the media. I'm gonna just go into this really fast because I've been part of a media scandal in Philadelphia with the fire commissioner in Philadelphia. He came to visit our bookstore fire commissioner Ayers, and we pulled out the tape, the video camera, and taped him saying he loves Black and Nobel, he loves the bookstore, and some alumni from Drexel College. I actually watched it bubble through comments. They were really hating on the fire commissioner for saying he loved Black and Nobel. And they were saying, why is he in this bookstore, this Black bookstore, while he's on duty? So the fire commissioner, about a year later, had to suspend one of his workers. And he suspended one of the white firefighters for coming out with a calendar for wives that had lost firefighters. And the calendar was like him basically naked except for his underwear. And I guess the fire commissioner had to do what he had to do, and he suspended him. But it was a big conspiracy, and we were right in the middle of it, and it was through a YouTube clip. It was all over the news, and unfortunately, this firefighter committed suicide over it, you know, and no, the actual firefighter that was suspended committed suicide, you know, over this hype. And before he committed suicide, he went to he called up to the Black radio station in Philly called WURD and apologized for Black and Nobel being involved. And it just was like, you know, people take bits and pieces, the media, and make things up. So most of the media that we see, just know that it's not real. It's stuff that's made up in the studio, and they do a great job at it where it makes it look real. You know, so let's just come up with our own. Like now, you don't even have to make any edits up or anything. I think most of the people are live right now, so you can't really make anything up when it's live. So that's the world we're living in right now, real time. Movies are kind of fading out. You know, it's kind of messed up because it is an art, and you have to be creative to do it. But now people are so desensitized, they want the real thing. They're doing murders on real time and all kind of stuff. So we got to prepare our minds for this stuff because it's kind of too heavy to even think that it's real. It's getting like to the point movies and things like that are becoming outdated.
Well, I want to come back to you, Brother Hakeem, because you're doing work with, you know, sending work to the prisons as well as some grassroots organizing. So I added, you know, I wanted to mention about Tupac's work politicizing gangs for peace, and you can add on to this, John, and reducing violence. Now, you mentioned how, you know, the death row, as Tupac was doing positive progressive work, that some members of death row were engaged in drugs and guns. So we have these forces within our community that, you know, potentially can minimize what you're doing. So what would you say, you know, we can address Tupac's work doing that, but you could just share what you're doing organizing as well.
Yes, well, that's like that's basically the main thing that we do at our bookstore. Created it about 12 or 13 years ago. I'm not the first to do it, but the name of our slogan was Black and Nobel, we ship to prisons. But it became like a big deal because of just the rate of so many men, women, and children going to prison. Basically became part of everything that our bookstore is about. So we ship to prisons. I ship books to Matulu Shakur. I mean, he was in Colorado, USP. I ship books to Wesley Snipes, Lauryn Hill. You think about any of these people that are celebrities that are celebrated, I've shipped books to them. And I think that, you know, most people get their lives together in prison versus the people that, you know, you hear about the hype, how prison is so bad, but it's kind of like a place where, you know, you're by yourself for one, so you don't have anybody to lean on. And a lot of people discover education and spirituality in prison. You hear of Malcolm X and so many others, but as most people, you know, even though they're surrounded around killings and killers and just so much stuff, you know, it's not a lot of distractions, you know, like it is out here. I really believe out here is the real prison. So, you know, I stay connected with the families of the people that are incarcerated, and I encourage them to keep their head up because they're doing a bit as well, raising the children on their own and things like that. And it's kind of just the way it is these days. It's like a badge of honor to go to prison. I hear so many young brothers come home like, you know, they brag about it, you know, and I don't agree with it. I tell them when they say that, yeah, I just come home, and you can kind of tell too because the brothers look so fresh. You know, they have new clothes on, fresh cuts, skin all clear. You know, looking real buff, and you know they're excited to be home. But I tell them they don't have to mention that part of it because if you didn't tell me, I would never know. So prison, it could be good or bad. Unfortunately, what people don't know, there may be more drugs in the prisons than it is out here. So some people are introduced to drugs as well. It's always two sides of every story. So prison is hardcore, and it can also be a blessing. I know people that have came home from prison, and they'll never go back. They're on top. They're actually in City Hall, and they didn't take no for an answer. They just kept pushing. So you know, I like to shout out Wallow267. I don't know if anybody here follows him on social media, but this young brother just came home. He went in at 18 and now he's 38. He did 20 years. And he's the social media king in Philadelphia right now. I was with him last night after midnight. Wallow267. And he's so encouraging to the young people. You would never know he did 20 years in prison. However, he was on Instagram for 5 years in prison. So these guys have cell phones and everything in there. So, you know, they're making it comfortable in prison. You know, they want the people to think that they're at home. You know what I mean? So just, you know, if you can find it in your heart, you know, I do it as a business, but it didn't start that way. I did it because I had so many relatives there as well. But if you can try to write your family and friends a letter, that is everything to them. A letter alone will make somebody's year. Because when you go away, nobody really thinks about that. So when you hear of people like Pac, when he was in prison getting high and stuff like that, it's real. You know, the guards are bringing the stuff in. You know, they want to blame it on the ladies that are coming, but majority of the drugs are coming in through the COs and the wardens and everybody else. So just be mindful that, yeah, what Michelle Alexander said, it's the new Jim Crow. It might be beyond slavery at this point, you know, because it's big, big, big business. Those guys get 12, 20 cents an hour to work all day. So at the end of the month, they might have 30 bucks, 50 bucks for commissary, but they worked all month for that. And I just want to encourage all the families that suffer as well. You know, just encourage your children to stay out of there. And it's hard because it's set up for us to be there. So, you know, let's have this balance and have more forums like this and free all the political prisoners that's in there, men, women, and children.
Thanks, Hakeem. Yeah. So I think it's great what you're doing, Hakeem, with getting all these books to people in prison. I've sent a few books, and it's really hard to go through a special procedure when you're just an individual. So good job doing that. As far as what Tupac was doing regarding this, besides just getting Bloods and Crips peace truce leaders to get the gangs to reduce the violence in the community, to not deal drugs around schools, around kids, to not deal drugs after certain times, and all kinds of other things that were part of the code of thug life. And to get many of these gangs to stop dealing drugs altogether and turn on to activism, he was doing a lot of that, and that was great. But of course, the CIA didn't like that because they're the top drug dealers in the world, so it's taking money out of their pocket and the oligarchs' pocket. But he was also talking with Sanika Shakur, who was a former Crips gang leader. He changed his name to, it was originally Monster Cody Scott. He changed his name to Sanika Shakur because of Matulu and Tupac. And so Sanika has, you can see on YouTube that there's Sanika accidentally had some recording when he pushed record on something, or his girlfriend did, when Tupac called him, and they talked for a while about starting community centers, starting sports leagues together in Los Angeles, and then trying to get that spreading around the country. So he was doing a lot of different activities like that to stop the violence and stop the drug dealing, and to do positive things for communities. One last thing I just want to say about the prisons, though. With Tupac, he was sent to solitary confinement for 10.5 months to mess up his mind, and his stepfather Matulu was sent to the most maximum security prison in the country, Florence. And they said a memo from the warden said because of his influence over young black males. And how was that? That was obviously through Tupac. So he sent him to an underground prison in Florence to take away his influence. It's very sad. Sure.
While we're still on the same topic, before the questions change, I like to big up the younger people that helped me out. And the twins over there, could y'all stand up? This is David and Aaron, and these are the guys that are responsible for shipping the books to the prisons for me and for Black and Nobel. They're 22 years old, they're twins, and they're very positive. And, they read the letters and they make sure that everything goes out. And, just because we're speaking of the negative side, I always got to mention the good that's happening too. So these are my guys right here, Aaron and David, David and Aaron. Thank you very much.
I just want to add to this conversation about these drugs. I mean, we've seen many different artists, popular artists that, now are dying from, these different types of pain medications. So, I wanted to add, and this kind of goes into the second book, John, how, and Ari, you can answer since you know many of these folks, how drugs in the film, music, and entertainment industry, I'd say, used to destroy movements. So I'll just say what we have.
Yeah. I have a whole book on how that worked, but try to keep it to a synopsis of the fact that the best evidence shows that the CIA's MKUltra project used musicians to popularize drugs, and then when they basically started to sober up and get more into activism, they killed them. That's a sad pattern that is reflected by the faces of people on the cover of my book. The key people are, of course, John Lennon. People can understand that. Jimi Hendrix, though, also, and Kurt Cobain, believe it or not, and Tupac Shakur. And but you could also, in other ways, they targeted other musicians, like the way I described what they did to Paul Robeson. They, after dosing him with acid or some other super psychedelic, they just basically ruined his mind by dosing him over and over again, and then convincing him he had to go into a mental hospital and giving him overly high doses of ECT, electric convulsive shock treatment. Okay, with Bob Marley, they were, Bob Marley said that the Rastas were smoking weed in order to keep away from the cocaine and heroin that the CIA was trafficking into Jamaica. Whether that worked, I can't say it surely works, but if it worked for him, great. But they, then the CIA director, William Colby's son, Carl Colby, infiltrated the film crew. After the CIA paid gunmen to shoot Bob Marley and his wife, the socialist prime minister who was running, whose election was coming up in a few days, Bob Marley was going to do a concert that was considered a promotion of the socialist prime minister of Jamaica, and he was a friend of Bob Marley's. He put him in an encampment to hide him out from these gunmen, the CIA paid gunmen, and the CIA backed the opposition guy to the prime minister. And so in that encampment, the film crew was going to film the concert and film the work up to the concert. And turns out Carl Colby had infiltrated the film crew, gave Bob Marley gift shoes that had a wire in them that stabbed Bob Marley in the toe. He got cancer in that toe, and that cancer spread throughout his body, and he died of cancer. And I showed the documents of MK Ultra that showed that they were working on a super, cancer-causing agent that could cause cancer quickly. Now, of course, Bob Marley, it took some years for him to die of that cancer, but it's just very sad, how they do this, how they're targeting our musicians. But again, this is what's going on with musicians, and there's loads. When Hakeem talked about Wu-Tang Clan. With Wu-Tang Clan, they were very positive and very activist. But who came, into their group was a guy who was an FBI undercover agent who was formerly working for the mafia, a guy named Michael Caruso. This was on the front page of the Village Voice when I was living in New York. Michael Caruso was one of the biggest ecstasy dealers in New York City, and is throwing raves up a storm, tons of parties with tons of ecstasy, and what they call Molly these days, MDMA. And so he gets to be the personal manager for 2 Wu-Tang Clan members. And then when that Village Voice article came out, they instantly fired him. But they didn't, they didn't talk about that, how they instantly fired him, when they couldn't believe they hired this guy and he's an undercover agent for the FBI. He's working. And he's also obviously trying to convince Wu-Tang Clan to go to these rave parties and ecstasy parties and promote ecstasy. And that's going on with tons of rappers. This is going all over the place, to the point that Death Row Records is an anomaly. It's not the only U.S. intelligence front company. There's a record company called Fizz Records. Fizz is a nickname for ecstasy. And they're trying to promote that to the community. And here I am now counseling people whose brains are dead from ecstasy. Their minds are hurt by ecstasy. All kinds of studies. I have all kinds of studies in my book showing young people's minds are being hurt by this drug. It's hurting their memory. It and acid are both causing damage to people's minds. It's really sad.
Your question was, is the music?
Yeah, how drugs in the film, music, and entertainment industry. Because what I was thinking about, of course, many people speculate on Michael Jackson, Prince, Whitney Houston.
So many.
Yeah, right. It's like, is this like a rites of passage, if you will? Like, if you want to go to this next level, here, you're going to have to use this. We're going to have to control you somehow. Right. So
Yeah,
I was just thinking.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys are saying. Yeah, it's definitely planted, and I think the solution, because I'm solution based, right? So I think the solution is always to educate things like this again, just to educate our people who don't have the knowledge, right? Because they don't understand what this really does to you, because they see or hear about all of these celebrities, Percocet, all of these things that are, and these are prescription drugs. These are things you can easily go and get and say you have some issues going on. But I think the solution is always continuing to educate, not preaching, not trying to, talk at our young people, because our older generation, we kind of get it, right? Most of us. So I think it's important that we educate them in a way and speak to them to the way that they understand that this is literally set up to destroy you. This is put into our society, into our system. And there's so many documentaries. I was just watching a documentary with my son the other day. I can't remember the name of it. But there's so many documentaries about how the Reagan administration has set these drugs and cocaine and crack cocaine into the African American communities. And so So we just have to continue to educate our young people so that they're aware, because I don't think they're aware because they're too caught up in the music. They're too caught up in this false reality, and they want to be like these people. So me and my son literally just had this conversation on the way here because we were listening to some music, and I was telling him, you have to be careful what you're putting into your system, into your spirit. I said, you don't understand what these, I know you like the beat and it's cool, and you know, what is it called, babe, that you do? And all these dancing, dabbing, and all this stuff, right? Like, I get it, and he likes the beat, but I want him to understand, you know, what they're trying to do to you. They're literally trying to destroy you, and he has to be aware of that. So again, it's just education.
Well, that goes into, oh, you can clap it up. Thank you, thank you. But that goes into the next question, and this is for this one, no more chains, breaking the chains of destructive behaviors and overcoming the addiction to negative lifestyles. I think that's essential. So back to you, Ari. You can plug your film.
Okay. Well, my film is about breaking emotional, mental, generational chains that hold us back as individuals and as a people and as a community. Because we have these, it's a little deeper than what we're discussing today, but we have these stories that happen to us. Maybe all we've seen was our uncle, our aunts, our mothers, our parents on drugs, so that's all we know. So sometimes that's all we become. So in order to break these chains, we have to release ourselves from our story so that we can become more and do more. But that's kind of a different topic. But am I on the right topic or am I off topic?
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the right topic. Okay. So to break these chains, again, I think it all just boils down to education, dispersing the knowledge and making sure that our young people and our community as a whole are implementing the new knowledge that is given to them. And so what we have to do is have to teach people how to unlearn some of the things that they have been taught, especially in the school systems, especially in some of the prison systems even, because what they're getting is not real knowledge. And so I'm an advocate for homeschooling. I homeschool my son because, like I said before when I was here last time, I just really feel deep in my heart that no one is going to be able to give my son the type of education that I will. Because I just know when they're in that school system, there's just like when they're in prison, sometimes they're just a number. They're just, you know, a person. That's not all teachers, nothing against teachers. I respect teachers to the highest level of respect. But I think that it's just so important that we continue to educate. So we have to break our own addictions to this lifestyle, this negative lifestyle that is being fed to us. So it's really up to us as individuals to take back our power. Right, because before all of this happened, before, you know, us coming to America, we had so much power. But if our young children don't know it and they don't understand it, they're not reading it and not learning it, because in schools and in their communities amongst their friends, they're being taught that they are inferior, you know, that they're nothing, that they're not, you know, it's just crazy what they're teaching these kids in school. It just hurts my heart. So it's up to us to just help them unlearn and really share with them the power that they really have, that they're really kings and queens, and they really can, you know, push through no matter what their story is, no matter what they've been through, no matter what they've seen, that they still can persevere no matter what. So that's my entire message with my film, No More Chains. So, and I do have some copies here just in case anybody want to purchase them. But as far as my next film that I'm working on is called Father's Day. And this is where a lot of our fathers and mothers are in prison, but a lot of our fathers too, there's a couple different areas. Some of our fathers in the Black community leave their children. But what happens is, what a lot of us don't understand is, if you look at the Willie Lynch letters, is that the reason why they're leaving their families because that's what they've been conditioned to do. Because in slavery, as a lot of us know, some of us may not know, there were bribes. Okay, hey, young man, here, we need you to make some babies. So you go make some babies and we'll give you freedom. I mean, what man is not going to turn that down? He gets some booty and he gets to get some freedom. I mean, come on. So it was just this thing where it kind of put it into the psyche of the Black man to have children and leave. And then we have other instances where there are, you know, mothers who are not allowing these men that want to be there. So the next film is going to be called Fathers, which will touch on a lot of these issues that go on in as Black fathers and what their legacy should be. So.
You want to add to John? Because I know John works with Gerard and patients, so.
Well, I'll just say that
two things is, guys, if anyone with if they have your own addiction, the best recipe for recovery is professional counseling plus 12-step groups plus if you needed medication. But if you have a family member who has an addiction, I would add that tough love is, I'm sorry to say, is the only thing that works, or else you're enabling their addiction. And there's a new technique that I've been trained in called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a non-medicative way to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. And lots of us have grown up with some form of trauma. And sometimes that trauma does trigger our wanting to numb that trauma. And this technique is a pretty miraculous technique for overcoming trauma. And so I highly recommend, you can find on EMDR IA for International Association .org, you can find a long list of therapists that deal and work with trauma in that way all over the country, in this area, anywhere. And so final thing I'll just say is that, Mutulu Shakur started acupuncture drug treatment in this country, and it's a great, also another technique that can help with drug treatment. If you know acupuncturist in your area that does that, it's great. It's a great alternative treatment for it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, my bookstore is in a really, I would say, bad neighborhood. People try to say the urban market, the ghetto, but we do have a lot of genius there. But just over the years, I'm 45 now. I've seen some changes because when I was growing up, I actually used to sell drugs as a young teen. And just the way things are changing, it's like when we were coming up, it was like the young guys, we were out there selling drugs to the old heads, and now the old heads are selling the pills to the young guys because they don't want to take them because they can get these prescriptions and they're getting 100, 200 pills a month and they don't want to take them. So they take them and sell them to the younger people. People don't know, like especially people my age and the adults and the grandparents and the parents, they don't even know. They have a whole language for it. And they can be talking about the pills right in your face and you wouldn't even know. Oxycontins, for instance, they call them oxtails. I'm just giving y'all some stuff that I know from being in the streets. I own a bookstore, but it's in an environment that's where the hustle. I can go look out my window and see all this happening. Oxycontins is oxtails. Xanax are avatars. Like you would never even know what they're talking about if nobody put you on with it. So we got to be very careful. High school students get injuries in sports, and then they get prescribed Percocets or whatever it is. And, their parents are telling them, did you take your medication today like the doctor told you? So I just want people to know we have to find alternative ways to healing. Like he said, acupuncture, yoga, things like that. Because the body heals itself, but they're so quick to prescribe you drugs, especially for the younger people. They don't have the mind state. Because everybody that sits on the side and judge, you really, if you've never been an addict or you've never been around it, you wouldn't understand. It's bigger than just saying no. It's physical. The pills have opiates and heroin in it, along with everything else. So it's just not as easy for people to get off of these things as somebody would think that's not on it. I have family members that are on 14 and 15 different prescriptions, and they cry and tell me, and this is my own mother, she's in her 60s, and just stop. So after, years of doing that, you don't only just get addicted, mentally, you get addicted physically, and it tears you up. It tears your insides up. So we just have to look at a different route and listening to the doctor. And I think that the doctors are the new kingpins.
One other thing to add on to that is that these opiates, Percodans, the OxyContins, the heroin, they're all come from the poppies, poppy fields, and the two longest wars in U.S. history were the Golden Triangle for poppies around Vietnam and the Golden Crescent for poppies around Afghanistan. It's no coincidence. The oligarchs waged those wars to get in control of those poppy fields.
Thanks for that. And I just want to mention alcohol as well. Several years ago, Brother Haki, you may remember this, Coach Powell, 40-Ounce Scoundrel, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I don't know if they are in circulation, but you may be able to find some of his material on YouTube. But that's where he talked about Snoop a little bit in the book, and his St. Ides and Ice Cube, and some of the role of how they've been pushing malt liquor into the community, and how these artists are positioned to put that into the community. So I just got one more question, and then we're going to come to you all, and we can kind of close with this. I skipped a lot of these, so if you all had anything you want to ask that were on this, you all can ask. But and I got this from reading actually two books that, and John, you mentioned a few of them. One is FBI War on Black America, as well as Agents of Repression. So I just put it as a question: recognizing the agents of repression and the provocateurs' plan to stop the rise of the Black Messiah. That was a term that J. Edgar Hoover used to stop the rise. So how do we recognize the agents of repression? And I would equate some of these individuals that were around, they're always around our leaders, trying to give them drugs and trying to get them to compromise, trying to find a weakness that these individuals have. So I'll just end with that question, and we'll come to you all.
I want to get to the audience question.
Oh, sure. If you want to, yeah.
Which is, well, I just think using common sense and saying this is what's healthy, this isn't healthy, and going with your common sense is important. But so if someone's acting negative, stay away from them. And I'm hoping that we can all become our own leaders. It's terrible what they've done to our leaders. We got to educate ourselves, become our own leaders, and do our own organizing, our own activism. And don't worry, about rising to the top. Just worry about, each one teach one, and making, keep it as positive as possible moving forward. Okay.
Well, I'm done. You want to add anything? No? Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll take you guys' questions.
Just start right here. You want to step up further? You want to project, or however you would like. Just project for us so we can get the question into the.
Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna just run a few things down, like the movie, the Tupac movie. I didn't like it. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I wouldn't go back to see it again. It's because, like you said, I grew up in that time, so I pretty much know what I already saw. It was only like one or two things I had never heard of, but his life was so documented through media, through YouTube as well. I mean, a lot of videos being up on YouTube. I watched a lot of his interviews. So for me, the movie didn't really do anything for me, but maybe it did for people that didn't know Tupac. And of course, Resurrection. To me, that was the best Tupac. And the same thing I wanted to say too about the Future song. I didn't know what he was talking about either. That last song, because I heard on the radio, I liked the beat. So then I went on Tidal to listen to the original joint. I was blown away that's what, what I'm saying, dude was talking about. Then the prison thing that y'all spoke of, like the survival of the prison thing. It's like when you go to a place where, you talk about 1,000+ people, and you know the things that can go on and you make it out of there. It's like war. It's like when you go to war and you come home, you get all kinds of medals, Purple Hearts and things like that. So in a sense, that's why we glorify. I still don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm just saying that that's where it comes from. Because if you could survive prison, I mean, you pretty much can survive anything with things that go on in you. You know what I'm saying? I'm just running down a couple things. And then the music thing too that y'all talked about. I know coming up, it was like the streets control the game. You know what I'm saying? So if you was a fake rapper, the dudes in the streets check you. You don't have that no more. So you guys, like the industry, can dictate the narrative on what's real and what's fake. So I think that's what was that. A lot of these cats started these labels, or it was funding cats that was really doing it, because it's hard to be a hustler and be a rapper. So most rappers, they won't really hustle. They might work around it, but they weren't really going as hard as they was going in records. You know what I mean? So a lot of the guys that was really going hard kind of just gave them little money, kept them out of the streets, kept them in the studio, and let them do their thing. But they weren't really doing it. You know what I'm saying? And if they ever tried to portray it like that, they got smacked. But now you don't have the streets. It's not like that no more. You got music cats got basically all the money and kind of dictate the narrative to the streets. So that's what you kind of got going on with music.
Anyone else?
No.
Address it, or anybody want to address it?
I didn't hear a question. I just thought he was
Oh,
making a
yeah.
comment. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
No,
fine.
that was
That's
good.
fine,
That was
bro.
good. We agree.
Sister,
I come from the perspective of the mother. I have a 27-year-old and a 35, and I haven't sent my son out of this country. That's how bad it is. Because they were shooting every day. I didn't want my son to die, and I just heard about somebody's son that just died this morning because of all the gun violence and gang violence. But my question is, the time we live in is so chaotic. What is the solution as far as because of this time? What plan do you? What as far as escaping this mess? Because that's where I'm coming from as a mother. How do I get out of here? Because I'm not trying to stay. I'm not trying to be here. So what plan do we have? Because that's what I see our leaders are worthless when it comes to talking right now about all that's going on. As far as what is our solution? Ain't none of them talking about that. Right. We're talking about all these what I call band-aids on gun shopping. So I'm saying, what is the plan? I mean, because the enemy got a plan. He's gonna let that to destroy it. So we're talking about band-aids. And because there's too many of we losing. Too many, all the stuff we've been talking since I've been in this since the 80s. I was a Black Panther Party member. I was in the Hebrew Israelites. I was let's see, in all these churches, the mosques, and ain't none of them talking right. None of them doing nothing to really stop this mess. Because to me, well, let me get what is the solution to me? Because I don't hear the leadership talking about that.
Right. So her question was, what is the solution? Because she doesn't hear leaders talking about that. Yeah, can I say, because before I lose it, I don't think there is one solution. There can't be one solution because they don't have, the oppressors don't have one solution to get us out of here. I think there are several, but what he just said was really good, and we have to stop looking for leaders. I really honestly think that we have to, what can you do? That's how I think. We're looking for leaders. We're looking for somebody to take charge. We're looking for the next Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Marcus Garvey and all these people. But what are you doing individually to make that change, to get yourself out of the situation? I think that's number one. But I also think it also boils down to us really figuring out individually, even if it's just small, even if I just tap into my brother right here and say, hey, how can we work together as a small unit, just me and you? I know you know at least 3 people that you can get, and I know I need to know at least 3 people that I can get together, and we can build up our Black community. And it starts with economics. I really think it starts with the economics. I think that's how we can shut some things down. But honestly, I don't believe there's one solution. I think it's getting, what is your solution? Take what you're good at, your gift at, what you want to see changed, right? And you get with some people that agree with you, and you guys go and make some change in your community, right? That's what I agree.
With that, is that we had Black in the 80s, there was Yahweh McDonald, there was the Black, the Nation of Islam, and all of them built communities, built powerful economic.
But that's what we need to do. But we can't just say, okay, I'm the leader, I'm the one that's going to start this. We have to start small and grow it big. But a lot of change can be made just on an individual small level. And I think we have to get a way of thinking that it has to be like it used to be. Now, I do think the Black Panther movements and those movements that you're talking about are wonderful examples of community. I think we can use those. History is always good to use as an example. But I also think that too, I know some amazing small groups in my community that are making major change. And we can't think that we're all going to just have this big problem solved for everybody at the same time. I think that's impossible because everybody's not thinking at the same level, right? So I think it's just that's just one solution, even though I think there's hundreds of solutions. But I think that's one small solution where we can start within ourselves and say, what can I do right now as my own leader, stand in my own power, get together with people who believe and agree with what I think the change needs to be, and where can we start just start small.
Have you heard of the thing out or RX-84?
The RX-84, yes.
Okay. So you know they got military laws out here now, pay for that. That say they're getting ready to come in our community and attack us.
Right.
Well, I mean on a larger scale, like military Ecuador did it's called DEA and Ecuador, like thousands of them, right?
Right.
Come to the building right now and kill people.
Right.
So this is where we at. This is the time.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying, but all I'm saying is I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect, and I agree with what do we do, what are the solutions. But I think that knowing what you just told us, how many of you guys knew? Just be honest. How many of you guys were aware of what she just said? Right? Okay. But look how many people were not. Okay? Think about the people that were not. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So how can you as an individual with the knowledge get the information out to the people so that we can make change? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that what you're saying is incorrect. We do need to make change. We do need to come together as people, but we also have to understand why we don't, why mentally we have this self-hate and why we have this not coming together as a Black community. I know we need to come together as a Black community. We all know it, but we're not doing it. But there are a lot of people who are. There are a lot of people who I'm seeing major change. Now I'll let him come because I can tell you guys are like ready to talk, and I'm not trying to argue with you, but all I'm saying is sometimes we have to stop looking for a leader, and that was your question at first. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it seems kind of bleak, but sometimes I look at things like what people are doing in other countries, and Venezuela, as an example. Venezuela has an incredible cooperative movement going on where Hugo Chavez got what was like 800 or less, maybe even less than that, 500 or co-ops. It's turned into 8,000 or 12,000 different co-ops now, where they form these little neighborhood co-ops, and they decide on things together. They get their food together. They do all kinds of things together in these little co-ops. Every neighborhood is their own little co-op, and that co-op movement's one positive model for a different way of doing things. But just one example of ways to look for other answers and other possibilities.
They got one speech right now. They murdering.
No, yeah, but that's not true. That's the media. That's mainstream media showing you something like that's. New York Times had a big picture of that happening. The black smoke and this one demonstrator. Okay, and that's an anti-Bolivarian movement demonstrator. It's a paid demonstrator, I argue. We're talking about, if you look at like Abby Martin's the Empire Files on the Real News Network, she'll show you what's really going on. Those protesters are paid protesters to go against the socialist revolution that Hugo Chavez started over there in Venezuela, capitalists in our country that own our media are very against that. It was spreading throughout, South America and Latin America in general. And we want to do everything we can to get a hold of their oil because they have the largest oil resources and reserves in the Americas. And that's why they're painting this picture that it's a civil war. It's not. It's a few hundred paid protesters that are doing it on behalf of the very wealthiest in Venezuela and don't represent the masses that are in these thousands, like literally over 10,000 co-ops. That's what he's done. He's taken poverty and lowered it by 50%. He did incredible things with the Bolivarian Revolution over there. And he was elected to office, and then he got cancer mysteriously, as did about 5 or 6 other leftist leaders of Latin American countries about the same time, within several years of each other. But his vice president is now, Maduro, is running the same policies he was, increasing the co-ops, giving money to social programs and the poor, and that's why these paid protesters that are being paid by the U.S. government to go to fund these pseudo revolutions, fake civil war, and that's what they're showing us. It's not civil war down there. People aren't. Abby Martin even says they're not doing enough to stop these protesters from doing what they're doing. And so anyway, there's like 90 people died, and most of them died at the hands of the protesters. They took an Afro-Venezuelan and burned him alive. They dumped gasoline on him and set him on fire. It's just horrible. They're racist and horrible people. These guys. That's my impression though.
Well, I always try to tell people when they ask what's the solution when they come into our bookstore, because you have people come into the store and the same topics that we're speaking on now, people will come up and say what we're not doing, and the same second purchasing something from us, people will say, oh, we don't support. But you're actually supporting me right now. So we have to focus on what's happening in the now. And that's the start, because this is a start right here. It's just this gathering today. It would have been, if we could have had a big auditorium, but we can't focus on that. We have enough people right now to go home and reload. I see we have all these cameras in here. That's a start to just reload it, repost it, and talk about it in a positive way, because the media works really hard at putting out negative information. But like I said earlier, we are the new media. So that's that. We do have the platforms to make the change. Same way that they're saying that all these killings are happening. It's a lot. Look, we're in a vegan restaurant, with basically plant-based and Black owned. So, I mean, I don't hear people bragging about these things, but we always focus on the negative.
You remember when they dropped the bomb in Philly in 1985?
Yes, those are some of my family members, yes. And they're still fighting, and if we just focused on that, and all these other horrible things, we could talk about Black Wall Street, which was another bombing, but there are a lot of positive things happening. And this is the messed up thing, because as I speak right now, my bookstore is in trouble. I've been open for almost 15 years and we're not doing too good. You know what I mean? But we're doing great online, but the bookstore isn't doing too good. So, we're overlooked for all the positive things we do around there. We are overlooked, because of so much stuff happening in the dark side, so we can't keep focusing on that. We're surrounded around bad, but we have to actually go look for the good stuff. So this is one of them today. I agree with her, solution is everything, because, it automatically gets the attention when you are, talking about the bombings, the shootings, the this, the that. It's nothing really new, really. The same things were going on in the 60s. It's just that now we're doing it amongst each other. So we can't keep saying they and he and the white man, because I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of us come at each other lately than anybody. So we got to stop walking past the guys on the corner and stop being scared of them and have conversations, not judge them or drill them as if they're an enemy, because these are our children. You know, I really don't open up too much about this, but I lost my oldest son 2 years ago. And it wasn't to killings, it was through prescription drugs. So that's one of my reasons to keep the store open and keep up this fight. But I don't mention this because if I do, I'll start thinking down and out, and then I'll become depressed. But I'm mentioning it today because I gotta keep fighting for those that didn't lose their children. So let's just focus on the positive things that are happening, and that's the start of what are we gonna do? Because I think we're doing it right now.
A question.
Sure. Let me get him first. We got time, all right? We got time.
He picked to my mom. I was gonna say, man, we gotta stop being white, man. We gotta blame ourselves every day. Look in the mirror, go home, and think what we do wrong to each other. Cause in the day, we gotta be held accountable. We do our own action. Cause they put in your community, that don't mean you take it. You got your own choice. Because I was raised the white way when I was coming up. It was the way it was, and it's happening now. Because we live in the depression world right now. We got to get out of that depression. I'm trying to have to get up, wake up to this hell, and it's time for change, man. We got to come together. All we have is us. We have to make a change, man. It starts with you. You got to educate yourself. Can't go by what you was taught by, and that's why you got a smartphone. You get your money's worth, and you educate yourself. That's the best thing to do. Educate yourself. That's how you're gonna be more awakened.
All right. You want to project, or you?
Yeah,
Like, please.
my interest in coming here today was largely because, to me, you know, us mentioning Shakur, and, you know, that's great, but, you know, obviously he was a leader that, you know, we lost him too early. But I think the main issue of my main interest in coming here is because it goes beyond just being in the public eye. You could just be a citizen, and the surveillance state comes at you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it came at him because he's in the eye, and we're talking about him today and making him the main focus. But you mentioned your son, right? No one's immune anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to focus on that. So when she mentioned that, you're right up the alley as to what grabbed my interest in this meeting. Because it's not just the Shakurs anymore. It's anyone.
Mm-hmm.
The Patriot Act, precisely. I mean, I wear my hair in a natural, and I make sure I blow dry it out hard so it can look really Afro-ish. You go into Starbucks, no offense, Caucasian neighborhood, they look at you, and they will follow you where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're immediately a target. We're all targets. And the citizens on patrol business, cops, whatever that is, where they follow you everywhere. You see people doing all these military tactics. They're standing next to you, they're following you. No, I'm a lawyer, so, you know, but I mean, it's obvious to me that we're all targets. It's not about the Shakurs, you know, they throw that up there. It's all about, you know, they put these people up there like, oh, because, you know, they're movie stars, so their life is different. We're all targets. Thank you. We are all targets. I have been targeted. I have been followed on the highway. Everywhere I go, I have been followed. I'm sure you're in here right now following me. And I'm a normal citizen. I haven't done anything. Okay? Went to law school, did everything they wanted me to do. And they're constantly buzzing around me. I owned property in DC years ago. Well, I still own it. And they came after my property. So I bought it in court. I won. I wasn't supposed to win. So there's been a target on me. And I know I'm not any different from anybody else. If you
think you're immune and you think you have to be the Shakors, and we have to have a meeting on the Shakors, then you're lost. We're all targets. And what is it called? Lex 84?
Rex.
Rex 84. If you think your life is normal, trust me, they're listening to your meeting right now on your cell phone. They're watching you. They know when you go home. They know everything about you. So if you want to waste this meeting, and I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. I'm a fighter. I'm not a diplomat. Don't let the white skirt fool you. I'm in here to let you know today you are being watched. You're all being watched. You're all being followed, and you don't have to be. What's Shakur's aunt's name in Cuba? Shanta. You don't have to be a Shanta. A Santa. You don't have to be. You're being watched, and they're in here. They're with you. They look like you. They probably live in your home. They're probably eating out of the same dish with you. And they're targeting you. They've infiltrated our families. Okay? You're not sending your son to their schools? You're absolutely correct. Because that's how they get the folks to target you. They will turn your son against you. So that's why I'm here. I'm not here to talk about the Shakors. I grew up during that era as well. I'm fully aware of his music. I love it. I'm here to talk about me and you.
Yeah.
I'm here to talk about her son that was forced to leave. And this lady will tell you, I got here very early. She was like, who is this woman? Right? And I see watching me all the time, like, did her husband come in here? No, he's like, the food is good, I'm gonna deal with the food. I know you will handle that. Okay, so I'm here to let you guys know it's about us.
Yeah.
We lost Mr. Shakur, we lost him, and I'm gonna call him Mr. because he deserves some respect. But it's about us now. I'm here about better. My time is very expensive. I want to talk about, coming to my community. Because I know I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. They're following me on the highway and they're watching me. And I'm not afraid of any of them. Because I beat them up in court 9 years. I'm not kidding myself.
All right. Well, let's give them a chance to respond.
It's about, no, I'm not. It's about us. It's about us. So I want to hear, I don't want to dictate your meeting, but I want to bring it first forward. Not the entertainment industry, it's about us. What's happening in our communities now? I'm here now, I want to hear.
Okay.
So that's why I'm here.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I would love for my panel to answer. I'll just say, when you mentioned about they're targeting everybody, there's something in an intelligence agency called a threat assessment. So certain people reach different levels based upon various opinions of what they believe one's ideology may be. So that's an understanding that we have to look at. Some people, they may not have, like Dr. King, people may not think, well, why would they target Dr. King? So, it is different levels of threat. And I got that from Coakley some years ago. So, but I'll allow for my panel. I'm sorry? Yes, I was the last one to bring him to Baltimore before he deceased. Yes, indeed. Okay, and I'll just say that he mentioned the move. These two were introduced by Pam Africa. So, I mean, I'm just saying, just to let you all know that there are people here that understand different things that are going on. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'll let you all answer the sister as well.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think the Black community as a whole is being, because these people at the top are incredibly racist, incredibly bigoted, and they are. The only reason they do have crazy satanic crap going on too. But I focus on the FBI war on Tupac Shakur and Black leaders, because if I focused on more than that, the book would have been 10 times as long and I couldn't have sold it. But I include the way they've targeted Black community in general, like the Atlanta child murders. If you remember that in the early 1980s, that was covered up. That showed, there was evidence, and I showed that in one chapter of my book, that the KKK was behind that. The FBI was inside the KKK when that was happening, and they covered it up. Why? Because they were probably part of it. It keeps happening where the FBI is infiltrating and acting like, oh God, my report didn't make it out of whatever, but it shows they were really part of it. They knew what was going on, and the KKK are acting as their pawns, it seems, an extension of the FBI. Unlike the way mainstream media shows it, as oh, they go down to Mississippi burning and they solve everything. That's not the way it happens. They're an extension of these bigots, the KKK, it appears. But I just hope that we can, as comrades in the white community, as comrades in other ethnic groups, we can support whatever we can of anything that's going on in the black community. While at the same time, we are targeted to a lesser extent. Our musicians like Cobain and John Lennon, they were murdered by U.S. intelligence. I show all the evidence of how and why that did happen. And it's people in the Students for Democratic Society were targeted too, but to a lesser extent, not as brutally, because they are incredibly racist and they're much more brutal against black leftists than they are against white leftists. So of course they still did assassinate RFK, assassinate JFK, assassinate John Lennon, Kurt Cobain. But we need to form, more and more white awareness to support this horrible racism and, murderous, genocidal racism that's coming out of government in general, but obviously particularly out of the Trump administration and the other fascists that are, behind the Trump administration, oligarchs and the Senate and all that. So hopefully we'll be able to keep doing that in some way, shape, or form.
Wow. That was good. And I totally agree with everything. I think that the much passion that you put on us being watched, again, people don't understand that. And I get it, which is some of the reasons why I do a lot of what I do. But I think we have to be the example. So being here and participating in these types of things, we're being the example. So we're a part of the change. But I do also agree with, because I learned this also from studying the Black Panther movement in Oakland, California, was that they partnered and got with white organizations. Yes, because those are the people where, and I'm not saying this to come down on our community, but they have the change. They got the money, they have the funds. And there are some people, there are white people who actually support our movements, right? But, there's a lot of other stuff involved in that. But here we have this brother here, But there are, so I think that we have to, again, another solution, because I think there's several solutions, but I think another solution is partnering with these other organizations and other groups and having these types of meetings. But again, back to her question, there is not one solution, right? So you made a very good comment, and I always I'm all about solution, so that's why I'm so active, and that's why I'm such a doer and an implementer, and bringing together children and adults and women and trying to make some change, and everybody won't get it, and that's just because they just won't. It just may not be that time or that place or that moment, but later on, we're laying the foundation, as I am in my son. He doesn't get it right now, that's why he's here, but this will all make sense later. Next time he's pulled over, next time, anything. So my question to you is, you being an attorney and going through it, I heard what you said, but I didn't hear any solution. So what is your solution? What do you think, answering this beautiful woman's question and what she's going through with her son? What is your personal solution that you think we could, Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
First, we can say, I'm going to just add on to what you just said. You said we don't have that. We always have money. We always have money.
Yeah, we spend the most money. We spend the most money. Yes,
we have to look for it. Yeah. Okay? We're all in here spending money right now. Okay? Stop looking for something. We said stop looking for a savior. That's what we need to stop doing. He is our brother, but not because he has more money than us, or his community.
I didn't say that, ma'am, but okay. I just don't want you to put words in my mouth.
No, I'm not putting any words in your mouth. What I'm saying is, and forgive me, I am angry. We have the money. We need to, instead of buying those Nikes or whatever, we need to put it to coming to meetings like this. Put it to coming to the counter out front and buying something. okay? Look for it. Instead of going to Kmart or wherever you shop or East Saint Laurent or wherever you buy your clothes, look for the money to come to places like this.
I agree. It's all about economics.
And supporting your movie, supporting his bookstore.
It's all about Black
that's the
economics.
solution. Like you
I
said,
agree.
about Black
It's
economics.
and it's so hard for people to understand that, because if you look at and this is a whole nother topic, but I also think that all of this money that our people are putting into we put billions of dollars a year into churches, but our community is still suffering, right? So we do have the money. I absolutely agree. We spend the most money, but we as a society are one of the lesser people who make the most money, right? But it is Black economics. I will go out of my way, and so, again, it starts with me. I'm being the example. I will go out of my way to go to the Black beauty supply store in the city that I live in. It takes me about 30 minutes to get there, instead of going to the Asian one right down the street. I will go out of my way to go get my nails, anything that I need done to support a Black business, go out of my way. So I think, again, it goes back to what I said, we have to, like you're saying, it all boils down to economics, because we are so powerful, especially with our money.
And I just want to say one other thing. So when we do sit to the table with our brother and his community, which I consider the larger U.S. community, because really and truly we're all kind of in this together. Even though they got the folks wearing the hoods thinking they're different, they're just one paycheck away from being kicked out of the white ghetto also. So when we do sit to the table with our brothers, we're sitting in power in that we're spending our money where it belongs and not coming to them and saying, you're our brother because we need your help. To me, that's the little brown brother or little Black brother syndrome. And we really need to get out of that. Oh, my name is Sharon Douglas. Please let it be known to everyone. Okay. I am here for war.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm here. When I left his neighborhood, which is my neighborhood because I infiltrated your neighborhood, I come home here to my people, not to sit, because if you're gonna speak with me, it's gonna be $3.60 an hour. I'm here because I love you.
Yes.
I'm here because I want to talk about us, about our family, what's going on. And I know I'm not alone. They're on you too. They're on you, like you said, with the drugs. Yeah, let me finish. I'm older than you. Okay, so yeah, I'm saying to you, they're on us hard.
Yes.
Okay, they're on us hard. I can feel it in the parking lot. I could feel. Yeah, I know they're on you.
I try every day. I wake up.
Yeah.
Because we hate each other, depressed.
Yes.
Depression. We need to put the religion book away. That's what's keeping us there.
Well, first of all, that's our religion because they stole,
But they give us
sold it to
Okay.
us.
Yeah, all right, so, I'm
So,
sorry, we
you know,
appreciate
but
that.
yeah, I got a solution.
Well, let me get this brother and the sister had another question, and let's kind of keep it going. But we can stay here a little bit and talk. We would love to have you all talk and interact as well. But let me let Brother Hakeem, can we all let Brother Hakeem speak as well? Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real short because I know we're running out of time. Just going back to what the young lady said about they're watching us and they're following us. I mean, that's nothing new. One time I was leaving work from my bookstore in my van, and I already knew they was feds. Just pulled up right beside me and Phil. That's my guy right over there that drives us. And basically, a man and woman federal agent pulled up next to us and looked at us. And I just looked at them and waved and said, "Hey, how you doing?" So when you're basing things, we can't base it on fear, because once we start becoming fearful of who your enemy is, and a lot of times they don't even come like this man here. They come just like you and I, like you was talking about Haitian Jack. So you can't pick up on who's watching you and who's following you because they come covertly. So I personally don't worry about that, because if I did, I wouldn't be able to ship books to the prison. You know, so we kind of cracked the code of worrying about who's on our back, you know, because that's always been the thing that kept us away from going to the next level. You know, you were able to crack the code by getting a law degree. He was able to crack the code by being a videographer. All of us in there is somebody. And if we worry, my whole thing is we have to just, even though it is overwhelming, we have to ignore those things and just go forward. And the reason I say it that way is because I can remember in the 90s when they were saying that the black man is an endangered species. And that's when I was 18 years old. I'm 45 now. So some of us didn't make it. Some of us didn't make it. But the ones that did make it, we have to applaud that. I'm going to end it with that. And I also want to just mention that our bookstore, Black and Nobel, has been on YouTube and the internet since 2006. So we're doing really good online. And we're not doing so good in our physical bookstore, which is like a half a corner, a whole corner long. Haki has been there, John's been there. We may have to close it soon and we don't want to. I see a gentleman here that was in Philadelphia yesterday at the bookstore, and I told him about this event, and he happens to live in this area. So thanks for coming out. And people travel from all over the world to come visit us. I just started a GoFundMe page. I've never really wanted to ask for any handouts, but I was asked to try to keep the store open. So the younger people encouraged me to start the GoFundMe page because I really feel like I would do better out here without the bookstore because of so much overhead, and the people that I'm paying aren't of our culture. So I'm renting from other cultures to run a black bookstore. So anybody here that can find it in their heart to donate to Black and Nobel, the name of the campaign, thank you. The name of the campaign is Save Black and Nobel, and it's on GoFundMe. And I think like this is 1 month in and we've already raised like $8,000. So I'm thankful for the people that have donated. I just want to just let everybody know the situation that we're in, because that's a part of us staying around for the next generation. And I gotta say this, about 5 years ago, Haki, you can agree, it was over, John, you too, it was hundreds of black bookstores. It's about 30 of us left.
So first, I just want to thank my king, Haki. He's very modest for putting this together. We were very excited about this event. We knew that there would be those who would not support it. We knew that there would be those who did not understand the mission of what he was trying to do, but we went forward anyway. And I would just like to thank those who attended. The people who are here are the people who are supposed to be here. And I know Haki has a long relationship with Hakeem. He talked about you all the time. When I was up in Philadelphia, he said, I'm making a stop before I come see you, babe. I'm going to see Brother Hakeem. I was like, okay, I get it. And John, thank you very much. We appreciate the book signing that you just had at Land of Kush. So we do appreciate that. I did have a question, but in the interest of time, I'm just, acknowledging Haki for his work.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? All right, go ahead. Real quick, brother. Real quick.
I got this new product called Inspire Network called the Cherry Pads and stuff. And you know how you've been buying them pads for all these years, for decades. I wasn't even born yet. Some tampons and sanitary and everything. They've been literally killing y'all women out here, poison y'all. We would wonder why y'all be going through it, snapping, motion. We be thinking, why are they snapping at us for? And now we finally realized that what was causing y'all, there was toxins and bleach in them pads. It was made with garbage, recycled bin, old recycled bin, and the one who owned it, they knew what they were doing. They knew to get their billions and billions of dollars off our women. But finally, I got something that women no longer got to suffer no more. It's all natural cherry pad. They don't have no chemical, no nothing. got the neck and iron strip, which remove cramp, smell, and pain. You know how you go to ocean and beach and thunderstorm and rain, it relaxes you and stuff like that. But we about to be a #1 company. We about to bring revolution to our women, to save our women. We need our women. Our women is our queen. We have to protect our women and protect our kids. Because without our women, we wouldn't be walking. We wouldn't be walking on the good way. Why don't push out that stuff? Our women is our future. No matter what color, our women is our future. They don't want to push us out the stomach. And we got to protect our women. Hold on to our women. If you want to keep the women healthy, you want to get these pads and all that. They're going to love you for this. You don't stop them from buying them porch bags. That's what's causing them to keep getting that money. They're going to ATM 4 or 5 times a day with this. They don't got to keep changing all day. It's healthy, very healthy. I'm telling you.
Thank you, Rashid. Rashid. All right, so real quick, sister, because we just want to give a closing comments. Come on.
I'm working with Congressman Chief on reparations.
Okay.
That's a very serious economic solution.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
and also I'm working on getting us out of here legally. I'm a criminal lawyer with you.
Yeah.
I ain't got my lawyer. But we're getting our citizenship changed because I just got my federal ID number changed. I mean, federal tax number changed. I got one, and also citizenship. I became a Cherokee Choctaw citizen.
Yeah, we got
You know how much money they get?
right? Yeah.
Economic.
Yes.
But I got a lot of my friends got locked up doing that. Oh, like what's his name? Wesley Snipes. He was into that, so that's why they locked me up. They said again, false media said it was because he didn't pay his tax. That was the bull crap. Right. But anyway, Lauren Hill. So we moved to another level. I got the brother out there. I don't think he did. He then became a private citizen. That's a whole nother. I'm just
Because they take all that money they get from
So it's past that. It's past that.
Right.
And he ain't locked up. That's what I like.
Yeah.
He's not locked up. So those are 2 solutions. Economic. Because we pay taxes to the enemy, and then think and get mad because they have money to send to Afghanistan. They gave them $6.2 billion to build up their military. What about our protection and our safety as citizens? So I'm just saying those are 2 economic things. Your citizenship got to be changed. And getting reparations, but you know, we got to work their process.
Sure.
And I just wanted to acknowledge Ari again, because Ari has been here with us several times, and we appreciate it.
I'm gonna buy a couple of her DVDs. So any closing remarks, everybody? My panelists, let's give it up for our panelists.
If you have any more questions, I'll be sitting over there by my books and films, and thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just got again always, me and Haki have been social media friends. I think we met about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's not too many people that I see on his level bringing people together this way. And so whenever I can be a part of something like this that I'm very passionate about, I do. I drive 2 hours to get here. Just to be, I don't live in the Maryland, DC area, but I just appreciate what he's doing, and anything I can do to be a part of it, I just want to be a part of it, especially coming and supporting black businesses. But I just want to just encourage you guys to always do and just keep doing what you're doing individually, collectively, on a large scale, however you're doing it, just continue to do it, continue to educate yourself, continue to come and talk and not debate about this stuff, because we put ourselves against each other because we're so emotional, and that's good. We're all emotional. Like, we have to be, if we're not emotional, something's wrong with you, right? So we have to be, but we have to talk solutions. Yeah, so continue to do what you're doing, everybody. I encourage you, and I just thank you guys for coming, and thank you, Haki, and all of you guys for having us and being so open to these types of discussions.
Thank you, Eric. I just want to say thank you to Haki, because he's always in Philadelphia and visiting us. I think 2 or 3 years ago we had Dr. Sabi in Philly, and yeah, we brought him here. And I just want to clear this up, because anytime we have a hero or Shiro, you know, we gotta stop giving these people the power that we're giving it. You know, he was 84 years old. He was a good friend of my family, and he was 84. He was arrested falsely. But as far as them murdering him, we have to stop remembering these greats that way because they lived through us. So energy never dies. And that's what we have to know, especially if you have children. You know, they lived through us and we lived through our parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. So we can't keep, you know, that it's like adding fuel to the fire. We don't know exactly what happened. We just knew that he was great, and Haki and everybody on the panel and everybody in here will someday perish, but we can't give the credit to whoever they are, you know. And I'm only saying that because sometimes I don't know who they are when people are saying that. You know, it's up here. And when I say that, it's because, you know, I've had a lot of negative things happen to me in my life, and I had a lot of positive things happen, and I'm just leaning more on the positive like today. Thanks again, Haki.
All right, thanks everybody. So support Black and Nobel's table, John Potash table, and Ari has her DVDs. I want to. How many y'all left? Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah. So yeah, get your pants, y'all. Yeah, yes. Yes, sir. All right. Thank you. All right. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I come see you, man. Yeah, man. Oh, 504. Yeah. What did you just say? Oh, 504. That's me coming in. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Rick. So we can go see how to do yes, he's right here.
That's a wrap. That's a whole program. And everything.
Nice to meet you. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I want your number too. I'll be taking out of
Oh my goodness. Come here.
Yeah, okay.